Chapter 189. You. Lu Zongming was really scared. At that moment, the way Fujiu looked at him reminded him of an animal crawling in the dark. What Fujiu said was simply terrifying. Even if he was beaten to death, Fujiu wouldn't have to take any responsibility. Was he still a high school student? They always hit people whenever they wanted to. But this person hit someone and destroyed the evidence? After Lu Zongming figured this out, he didn't feel relieved. Instead, he felt a chill on the back of his neck. At this moment, he realized that no one would pass by this place. Which meant that no one would save him. Fujiu was still smiling casually. Her long legs blocked Lu Zongming's only way out. It was because of those evil and handsome eyes that made people feel more oppressed. Lu Zongming couldn't even stand up. He stuttered and explained, Fujiu, I am classmates. It's inevitable that there will be some friction between classmates. I'm sorry for surrounding you. I apologize. Anyway, we have an exam in a while. It's not good to be late. Fujiu heard his words and raised her pretty eyebrows. You have a good attitude. But it's not a small friction between us. As she said this, she reached out her hand. Her silver hair moved slightly, and she directly pulled Lu Zongming's collar over. She pressed her handsome face down. You are deliberately messing with me, aren't you? If you want me to let you go, I can. Take out your phone and call the person who instructed you to do so. Lu Zongming's eyes trembled. What instruction? Classmate Lu. Fujiu smiled slowly and patted his face with her left hand. I don't have much patience. Are you going to call or not? Lu Zongming didn't say anything. Fujiu didn't want to waste time with him. She bent her right knee and was about to beat him up again. Lu Zongming stretched out his hands and shouted anxiously, I'll call. Fujiu laughed and threw him against the wall. Lu Zongming knew that he couldn't escape. With Fujiu's attitude, if he didn't make this call, he would really beat him to death. In fact, Lu Zongming's body was in great pain. What surprised him was that after being beaten up like this, there was not a single trace of blood on his body. However, his fingers that were pressed on the screen betrayed his current physical condition. He was in so much pain that he was trembling everywhere. On the other end of the phone, Fu Shiming was still wondering why Lu Zongming would call him at this time. He put the pencil case on the wooden table and pressed the button to answer the call. His voice was arrogant as usual. What's the matter? Young Master Fu. Lu Zongming's breath sounded shaky. Fu Shiming's brows furrowed. Where are you? Why are you talking like that? Lu Zongming was about to speak. Fujiu knocked on his wrist and spread out her left hand with a devilish smile, gesturing for him to give her the phone. Lu Zongming didn't dare to refuse. He realized that when Fujiu was angry, there was a natural coldness that made people afraid. Even though he was smiling, his eyes were as dark as the night, empty and full of hostility. Lu Zongming's hands were trembling as he placed the phone in Fujiu's palm. Chapter 190. When he heard that familiar voice, he felt a chill down his spine. Fu Shiming, who was standing in the classroom, froze. Why was Lu Zongming's phone in the hands of this trash? Fujiu was still laughing, and her voice was deep and pleasant. Honestly, I'm really curious. Don't you feel like you're being slapped in the face when others call you young Master Fu? Your name isn't on the Fu family's genealogy. Oh, right, it should be said that even your mother didn't marry into the Fu family. It's a pity that after so many years of planning, she still has to live outside and be a mistress. You. Fujiu, who do you think you are? Who do you think your mother is? Our whole family came from the countryside. Dad didn't want your mother for a long time, but your mother still doesn't let go. Do you really think you're so great? You're just a prodigal son whose company is about to close down, and you still dare to clamor in front of me? Fu Shiming stood up in anger. His fingers paused, and he gripped the carbon pen in his hand tightly. Fujio, who do you think you are? Where does your confidence come from? Compared to Fu Shiming's exasperation, Fujio's voice was much more languid. Fu Shiming, go back and tell Fu Zhongyi to return all his shares and assets. My mom will immediately kick him out. Let's get to the bottom of this. Who's the one holding on to whose things? Also, illegitimate son of Fu, if you want to fight, do it yourself. Isn't it funny to find someone else to do it for you? After saying that, Fujio hung up the phone and threw it back into Lu Zongming's arms. She tilted her head and put on her mask, revealing the evil smile in her eyes. She casually put her hands in the pockets of her school uniform and slowly walked out of the alley. Her back view was very cool, as if she hadn't just beaten someone up, but fed a kitten by the roadside. Fu Shiming was so angry that his handsome face was also extremely cold. He wanted to say a few more words, but he found that the other party had already hung up the line. This made him even more intolerable, but when he called back again, he had already changed people. Lu Zongming, who had just stood up, picked up the phone. Young Master Fu. What the hell is going on? Fu Shiming lowered his voice, and his eyes were frighteningly gloomy. Why would that trash use your phone to call me? Didn't you say it was all settled? Lu Zongming gritted his teeth in pain and said guiltily, Young Master Fu, it's not because of me, it's because of Fujio. I don't know where he learned how to do this, but he's so ruthless when he hits people. My leg was almost broken by his kicks, and that day. Actually, there were 7 or 8 of us, but we didn't surround him, and we even had to rest for a few days. Enough. The more Fu Shiming listened, the more venomous his eyes became. Everyone knows how incompetent that pervert is. How could 7 or 8 people not be able to surround him? Don't talk about this nonsense. If you can't do it well, then you can't do it well. Young Master Fu, really, I'm not trying to shirk responsibility. This gay is really hard to deal with. Lu Zongming was still desperately trying to explain. Unfortunately, the proud and arrogant Fu Shiming didn't want to listen to him at all. Fu Shiming didn't expect that after he spent so much money to teach Fujio a lesson, in the end, it was the other party who called him. To Fu Shiming, this was simply a harsh slap in the face. The burning sensation and anger on his face didn't subside even after he sat back in his seat. At the same time, the students from No. 1 middle school had already entered the exam hall one after another. Chapter 191. Every year at this time of the year, the students who played the game would pay special attention to the monthly test. The rules were not like their usual selves. Usually, the homeroom teacher didn't need to say anything and everyone would be there. No. 1 middle school had always had strict rules. Cheating is definitely not allowed. However, not being allowed was one thing. As students, they would still try their best to sneak a peek. There were policies from above and countermeasures from below. That was how things came to be. Other than the top students, the boys would usually find a reliable person to write the answer and send it to the group. After that, they would treat that person to a meal. Of course, this was also a risk. Everyone was busy with their own things, and no one knew that Fujio had just gotten into a fight. The monthly test wasn't held in the same class. Usually, several classes would take the test together. Therefore, when Fujio walked into a new classroom according to her number, all the students seemed to freeze for a moment. Just because, he was too handsome. The young man's tall and slender figure stood with his back to the light. His left hand was in the pocket of his school uniform. He had a head of silver hair and wore a mask on his face, revealing a pair of enchanting eyes. Who is that? Some girls had already turned around to ask. There were also a few people from Fujio's fan club, who felt their hearts tighten. It's Highness Jio. I didn't expect His Highness Jio to be in the same examination venue as me. Highness Jio. Don't you know him? He's the new school hunk that's been spreading like wildfire on the forum recently. The new school hunk? Forget it, a gay like him still needs to be verified. Moreover, our number one high school doesn't just look at his face. He doesn't have any ability, yet he wants to be the school hunk. In any case, the support rate is not low. Just wait and see. After this exam, those brainless fans will be dumbfounded. In the end, they will still be last place. Not only is he last, he's also a nouveau riche, unlike his younger brother. His younger brother is a true genius, but what about him? He only knows how to eat, drink, and be merry. He's just waiting for death to come. The comments were mixed, but Fujio just tilted her head and took off her mask. She held her chin and winked at the girls who were still looking back at her and calling her Highness Jio. She smiled beautifully. Good, good. His Highness Jio is breaking the rules. The girls all felt very happy to have such benefits. This was how Fujio did things. She was only responsible for making the people who liked her happy. As for the people who didn't like her, they could do whatever they wanted. When the invigilator came in, he found that the classroom was a bit different. The girls in the front row looked like they were at a concert meeting with their idols. It wasn't until he saw Fujio in the back row that he realized that there was a handsome guy there. Alright, all of you remember your exam area number. The invigilator raised his hand and looked at his wrist. There's only 1 minute left before the exam. Those who have mistaken the exam venue, please find your seat as soon as possible. We'll hand out the exam papers in 1 minute. The first test was English. As a hacker, English was her specialty. In addition, Fujio had been active on Fifth Avenue before, so she knew more than just English. The exam time was less than 2 hours, and Fujio finished it in an hour. She was the first one to hand in her test paper. The invigilator didn't say anything after seeing the young man put the test paper on the table. Chapter 192. The other people who mocked Fujio had the same thought. They looked at each other, laughed mockingly, and then lowered their heads to continue with their papers. Since there was still a lot of time left, the invigilator had nothing to do, so he simply picked up the only test paper on the podium and started reading. He didn't expect that Fujio would get the first question right. The invigilator didn't care much. He treated it as a way to kill time and continued reading. She got the second question right. The third question was also correct. The fourth, the fifth, even the reading questions were correct. The more the invigilator read, the bigger his eyes became. His pupils shook violently, and even his face showed extreme shock and astonishment. All of them were correct. How was this possible? The candidates didn't know what happened to the invigilator, but he suddenly stood up. They thought that he had caught something, so the cheaters were scared out of their wits and immediately pulled their phones back. Who would have thought that the invigilator would just stand there and murmur, "Full marks, this must be a full marks, what full marks?" What was the teacher talking about? The candidates were all dumbfounded. The good thing was that the invigilator was obviously not in the right state today, so they cheated and copied a few more questions. The exam lasted the entire day, from morning to afternoon. This day might have been especially torturous for others, but for Fujio, there was one good thing. She could go in and out of the bathroom freely during the exam. Anyway, she was always the first to teach the test paper. The last exam was physics, which was Fujio's only shortcoming. Compared to the other exams, she was much more serious about this one. The invigilator happened to be the one who taught Fujio and the others physics. She also saw Fujio, but for her, she only cared about the results of those good students, so she didn't pay much attention to the back. When the test papers were handed out, Fujio did the big questions first. She glanced at them and thought in her heart, "Awesome, my brother." All the questions were correctly answered by the Almighty. In the future exams, she would worship the Almighty. This was much more useful than worshipping Buddha. Fujio curled up her lips and started to answer the questions with a carbon pen. The light outside shone on the young man's fair, almost transparent face through the glass. At that moment, one could almost see the tranquil gentleness of time. It was said that serious men were the most handsome. He didn't expect a serious young man to be even more handsome. The girl sitting next to Fujio couldn't help it anymore. After the teacher walked over, she pressed the silent button on her phone and secretly took a photo of His Highness Jio. Fujio answered the questions very quickly, and when it came to the fill-in-the-blank questions, she felt that the knowledge was somehow familiar. An image of a supplementary lesson appeared in his mind. The man held his chin lazily and knocked her head with one hand. Even his voice was elegant and his expression was cold and indifferent. You can't even remember such a simple formula. I really overestimated your IQ. Every time Fujio thought of the Almighty's face, she felt indignant. She bit her pen and continued writing. In order to prove her intelligence, she had to get it right. Chapter 193. Usually, at this time, Fujio's class wouldn't be over yet. Today, she handed in her test papers early, so she called baby Feng. This time, they didn't go to the internet cafe. Instead, they went directly to He Corporation. That's right, He Honghua's company. Since the monthly exams were over, there were only 3 days left before the esports competition. In 3 days' time, they had to decide who would represent them in the competition. Lord Jiu was going to take her team members to the company directly. He Honghua wasn't in the company. She had been running around everywhere recently, trying to find members to represent her company in the competition. She didn't know that Fujio had already found them for her and even formed a team. When Fujio walked into the He Corporation, the assistant who answered the phone immediately stood up, and her face instantly turned ugly. How could she look good? Every time this nouveau riche came, he would either smash things or yell at Boss He, throwing a tantrum like a young master. If she had a son like this, she would just strangle him to save her from the annoyance. But to the assistant's surprise, the young man hooked up his lips and smiled at her. His eyes were as bright as stars, and even his breath smelled like sweets. I brought someone to sign up. Sisterly, please send me a list. The young man didn't stop when he said this. Instead, he put one hand in his pocket, walked forward casually with his long legs, and pushed open the office door. It was as if he was the boss of this company. The youngster, who had walked to the door, seemed to think that his assistant hadn't heard him. He turned around and raised his eyebrows. There was a hint of laughter in his voice, and his questioning tone was indescribably sexy. Sisterly. The assistant paused and looked at that silver-haired young man again. After meeting his clear eyes, she couldn't help but nod. She must have been poisoned. Feng Shang watched from the side, thinking that another one was electrocuted by her idol. Fujio didn't feel that her behavior was inappropriate at all. She sat down on the boss's chair, crossed her legs, and took the schedule from He Honghua's desk. They were all about the participating players. Fujio could imagine how much effort He Honghua had put into this competition just by looking at the form that had been crossed out over and over again. Everyone knew that He Honghua came from the countryside. What others didn't know was that He Honghua hadn't even gone to school. She had taught herself how to write. The handwriting on the form was even a little round and childish. Fujio touched the form and compared it with the one her assistant had brought over. She raised her hand and wrote down 4 names. What do you think? After writing, she tilted her head and asked Feng Shang. Student Feng's eyes lit up. Good. Qualifier, 4 versus 4, official format. It wasn't until he saw this official registration form that Feng Shang felt that he had truly become a professional team member. Idol, give our team a name. Fujio raised her eyebrows. Name? Can I take it? N. After Feng Shang nodded, he said in a deep voice, If Idol can't think of a name, I can also think of one. For example, we can call ourselves the Xiao Liquor. Fujio. What a strange sense of beauty. Chapter 194. The registration form was submitted electronically, and the system would automatically certify the team member's company. Any company that signed up would be stamped with a red stamp. He Honghua was sitting on the high-speed train back to Jiang City. She was worried about not having enough team members. She even thought about poaching people with money, but those who were good at games and had a bit of fame didn't want to join the He Corporation. Plus, some people were deliberately suppressing them. This made He Honghua unable to move an inch. There were still 3 days before the esports competition, but she didn't even have enough team members. Could she just accept her fate like this? He Honghua picked up her phone and refreshed the company's registration page. What she didn't expect was that when she refreshed the page, a red message popped up on the website. After seeing that message, He Honghua thought that there was something wrong with her eyes. She rubbed them with her chubby hands and looked again. It was still there. The words, He Family Army, seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, under the He Corporation's name, with the company's exclusive red stamp. It was reflected in He Honghua's eyes. He Honghua quickly clicked on that message. The team members were clearly visible. Shui Yao Yao, Feng Shang, Yin Wuyao, Fu Jiu. After seeing the last name, He Honghua's pupils suddenly shook. She checked it several times to make sure that she wasn't mistaken. Moreover, there were photos and identity information of the team members. The young man in the photo was so handsome that he could even outshine the stars. Especially when he curled up his thin lips and looked at the camera, there was a hint of evilness in his eyes. If girls saw that, they would definitely scream uncontrollably. She didn't know why, but He Honghua's eyes were a little moist. Only the website company had the right to see the registration information of each company. This was for the fairness of the competition. The players all participated in the competition with their real names. They would only compete with their in-game names when they arrived at the venue. This was also to set up suspense, so that it could trigger more heated discussions. So He Honghua didn't know that Fu Jiu was Spade Z. She was touched that her Jiu could stand up at this time. Even though her Jiu was a terrible gamer, she was simple in her thinking. As for the other 3, she didn't know where her Jiu found them to make up the numbers. But with this team, at least she still had the qualifications to register, and she wouldn't become a joke in the industry. Thinking of this, He Honghua smiled happily. Anyway, even if she lost, she still had her Jiu. He Honghua looked at her phone and smiled happily. Her eyes looked out of the window. Spade Z hadn't appeared yet, so the outcome was obvious. She probably didn't have any hope, but she still wanted to thank that unknown master for helping her when she was in the most difficult situation. She would make sure the He group would survive. Although she was uncultured and rude, she couldn't fall for her Jiu. She, He Honghua, was a boorish person. There was no other reason other than to earn more money for Jiuhua. However, He Honghua would never have guessed that her Jiu was that Spade Z. After Fu Jiu signed up, she played another round of games with Feng Shang. That day was the last time she logged into Spade Z's account before the competition, and nothing happened. After playing 1 round, Fu Jiu gathered all her teammates for a meal. Any student could understand the feeling of finishing an exam. They felt relaxed, and they wanted to have fun until dawn. 9:00 at night. Qin Mo, who was still commanding the battle in the Qin Club, glanced at his phone screen again. Chapter 195. Almost everyone in the team noticed their captain's action. It wasn't because they were observant. It was because, this was the 5th time the captain looked at his phone screen. From 5:30 until now, whenever the captain was free, he would look at his phone. It was so strange. The cat-like young Coco saw everyone's curious expressions and quickly opened a small group. Do you guys want to know whose call the captain is waiting for? Of course. Whose? Coco, hurry up. If you tell me, Big Brother will help you get on the rankings. Coco held his coffee cup and chuckled. Other than Spade Z, who else could make our captain so worried? Spade Z. The team members were even more enthusiastic, and one by one, they flooded the group. Coco sighed in a mature manner. Yeah, Spade Z, let's count how many times Spade Z has stood Captain up. Captain has never been this patient with me. You know I'm not patient with you, and you still say it out loud? The cold and deep voice entered his ears, and Coco froze instantly. Chin Mo put on his uniform jacket, and his casual tone revealed coldness. Barbecue for dinner. Bring Coco, let him watch. Coco lowered his head and bit the rabbit's ear. Captain, you're so cruel, why don't you use your side on Spade Z? Fatty patted his shoulder and comforted him. Coco, you really can't compare with Spade Z. His skills, his hand speed, that virus, it's rare in the country. Fatty was very excited when he talked about Spade Z, as if he was meeting his idol again. Coco. Fatty, are you sure you're not a die-hard fan of Spade Z? After Chin Mo walked out, he frowned. His slender white fingers moved, and he directly dialed a number. But what he heard was a notification that the other party's phone was turned off. Chin Mo's eyes were filled with coldness. He thought the youngster would be the first to call him after the monthly test. Now it seemed that he was being overly sentimental. After thinking of this word, Chin Mo tilted his head and laughed quietly. He threw the phone aside and thought of several ways to discipline his brother. Among them, the most satisfying one was to cripple someone. Because of this, he made a special call to his former business partner and told him that he understood how he felt after his younger brother disobeyed him. The CEO who picked up the phone was a little confused. After hanging up, he was even more confused. Chin Mo didn't think there was anything wrong with his actions. It was more efficient to listen to the opinions of experienced people than to fumble around on his own. Unfortunately, no matter how the other party told him to be gentle, the most gentle way he could think of was to catch the youth and teach him a good lesson. At the very least, he had to let the youth know that even if he was in the rebellious phase of his youth, he still had to report to his elder brother wherever he went. Achoo! Fujio didn't know that she had provoked the Almighty again. After she relaxed, she threw herself onto the bed. Her wet silver hair fell down, revealing a handsome face that was sleeping soundly. The monthly exam was different from the midterm exam. The results would be out very quickly. The next day, as soon as the students arrived at school, they were greeted with the most apprehensive mood. The first lesson was English. From the light footsteps of the English teacher, one could tell that she was in a good mood. Chapter 196. All the students were guessing who the teacher would praise. Without a doubt, they were the top students sitting in the front row. Who would have thought, the English teacher said an unexpected name, Fujio. Not only was his English the best in class, but he was also one of the few students in the school who scored full marks. Full marks. In an instant, everyone turned to look at the youth in the last row. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Whether it was Jiang Feiyang or Lu Zongming, who was beaten up by Fujio before the exam, both of their eyes were trembling. The former was because no one in this class had ever scored higher than him. The latter was because if Fujio got full marks, wouldn't he be the last one? That's right, Lu Zongming was the legendary second to last. None of this was the most important. The most important thing was, Fujio was ranked last, so how on earth did he get full marks? Everyone's eyes were filled with different emotions. Some were amazed, some were envious, and some were shocked. Of course, most of them were in disbelief. Fujio herself didn't feel anything. To her, it was fine as long as she could pass and didn't miss out on the esports competition. Of course, getting full marks was to make He Honghua happy. She couldn't always let people laugh at He Honghua, saying that her son was not only a perverted gay, but also a good-for-nothing who would only get the last place in exams. That kind of mockery was different from the Almighty's. The English teacher looked at the silver-haired young man who took the test paper away, and the more he looked, the more satisfied he was. This young man was the class treasure of their class. Not only was he good-looking, but he also had such good grades. Most importantly, Fujio's original English recitation of Jane Eyre last time had already captured the English teacher's heart, and he would definitely praise Fujio whenever he saw her. He had thought that one attack would be enough. The students in the class did not expect that the second attack would come back. Second period math class. Students, I'm really too happy today. Before I hand out the papers, I have to praise someone. All the students. Why does this sound so familiar? Fujio. The math teacher had a habit of bringing out his local accent whenever he got excited. Fujio is the most determined student I've ever seen. All the students. Perseverance? Teacher, are you sure you're talking about Fujio? That Fujio who always asked for leave. It said that the hard work pays off. I'm most satisfied with Fujio's results in this monthly test. The math teacher waved the test paper, looking like a leader giving a speech, full marks. Another full score. The students were stunned. They stared blankly at the silver-haired young man who went up the stage to take the test papers. He was so handsome that he was dazzling. The third period. The students didn't wait for the happy teacher to speak and directly said, "Teacher, just tell us, did someone in our class get full marks this time?" Full marks? The teacher burst into laughter. How is that possible? This is language. Writing a composition will deduct marks. Students, damn, that's right. How could I forget that writing an essay will result in a deduction of marks? However, I'm still very happy. Teacher must praise someone today. The students, teacher, did you discuss this beforehand? Can't you change your lines? Fujio, your composition is so good that I only deducted 1 mark. Students, what's the difference between that and full marks? On the day the results were announced, the students in the inferior classes suffered an unprecedented critical blow. Chapter 197. The teacher walked in with the test papers. Her face didn't look too good. Not only that, but there was an indescribable seriousness in her expression. Class representative, come up and hand out the test papers. After the physics teacher said this, she looked at the seat at the back and said in a cold tone, Fujio, come out with me. The students present were all dumbfounded by this completely opposite attitude. After all the teachers in front of them were praising Fujio, which completely hit them. But when it came to the physics teacher, the situation was like this. Was it because Fujio's grades were too bad? That couldn't be right. In the past, no matter how bad Fujio's grades were, the teacher would still be very calm. Everyone could see that she had given up on Fujio a long time ago. It seemed like she didn't care about Fujio's grades. But looking at the teacher's behavior today, it didn't seem like it was because of the grades, but if it wasn't because of the grades, then what was it? Fujio also raised her eyebrows. She put away her books and walked out of the classroom with her back straight. The physics teacher didn't say much. She walked all the way out without a trace of a smile on her face. She directly brought the young man into the grade office. Before Fujio walked in, she could hear the noise coming from inside. I don't believe that a last-place student like him can get such good grades. First place in the grade. The students in our Class A who went to the Olympiad only got full marks in 2 subjects. What about him? Full marks in 5 subjects. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's talk about his physics. How did he get full marks? Even their teacher Zhang said that Fujio's grades in physics couldn't be any worse, and that she couldn't even memorize a formula. But look at the result. Full marks. There was definitely something wrong here. The physics teacher paused for a moment before pushing the door open and walking in. Instantly, the office quieted down. But the teacher's expressions didn't change at all. Everyone's faces showed that they weren't convinced. After seeing Fujio, he took a sip of water, but his eyes swept over Fujio with obvious disdain in his eyes. Stand there. The physics teacher sat down in her seat, let out a long sigh, and said to Fujio, after what happened last time, the school has paid more attention to the treatment of students. If it's not something particularly important, we won't talk to the students. I can understand that everyone wants to get good grades, but the teachers aren't blind, and they have the basic judgment of every student. Now that all the class teachers are here, we all suspect that there's something wrong with your grades. Fujio, can you tell us how you got your grades this time? I've just said that the school has paid a lot of attention to the treatment of students. If you admit your mistake this time, the school won't say that they don't want you. They'll give you a chance. Hearing this, Fujio, who had been silent all this time, opened her mouth. Her lips curled up into a cold smile. Admit your mistake this time. What's wrong with me taking a test? Fujio. Chapter 198. Compared to the exasperated teacher, Fujio's attitude was much calmer. She had one hand in her pocket, looking cool and handsome, and her voice was very cold. She only said 2 words to the teacher, tutoring. Tutoring? That physics teacher sneered. I don't know what tricks your mom used to know the content of the exam in advance. The school did not do a good job in this area, but everyone knows that it's impossible to go from knowing nothing to getting full marks in just 7 days. This is simply a fantasy. What kind of tutoring teacher can do that? If there were such tutoring teachers, what would we, the teachers, do for? As soon as the physics teacher finished speaking, the other teachers also sneered. If there were such tutoring teachers, I, Old Lee, would resign and let him teach at number 1 middle school. Exactly. If you want to lie, say something practical. What's the point of a lie that can be seen through so easily? Our school should also investigate who was the one who sold these questions. Our dignified A class didn't even score as much as the last place. Who would believe this? That director wasn't too agitated. After all, last time's incident was too big, and he didn't want to take any more risks or responsibilities. How about this, Fujio, call your parents here first. This matter has to be solved. Fujio's thin lips curled up even more, and she lowered her voice. Solved? How? Are you going to fire all these teachers who slandered me? Fire. That teacher was amused. Fujio, Ms. Zhang is here, and she knows your learning situation the best. Fine, you can say that we are slandering you, but are your teachers slandering you too? Ms. Zhang was the physics teacher in Fujio's class. She looked down on Fujio from the bottom of her heart, so when all the teachers came to her, she had no intention of protecting Fujio. She was different from the English teacher, and she didn't believe that Fujio could get full marks. Fujio, you either admit your mistake, or call your parents here. Hearing that, Fujio's eyes narrowed completely. At that moment, her eyes seemed to be overflowing with a dark mist. The phone in her pocket had been vibrating since just now, but she didn't care. The teacher next to her was annoyed. Now, call your mom immediately. Fujio suddenly laughed, and her eyes were cold. You don't have to call my mom for this kind of thing. As she spoke, she took out her phone, pressed the answer button, and put it to her ear. Hello, brother Mo, where are you? The man's voice sounded like a high-grade red wine that had been frozen in a refrigerator. Even through the phone, one could feel the chill that seeped out from it. Fujio's smile was still there, and she said casually, I was called to the office by the teachers, so I didn't pick up the phone. They insisted that I cheated on the test and asked me to call my parents. I'm still dealing with it, but I'll call you back when I'm done. Sitting in the back seat of the Hummer, Chin Mo's slender fingers paused, and his eyes darkened. He slowly put the documents to the side and said in a low voice, which office? I asked you which office. Fujio, Age Group office. Wait here. His words were neither cold nor indifferent, and it was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. Chapter 199. After Fujio hung up, she was still a little confused. Did the Almighty mean that he was coming? Seeing Fu Jiu on the phone, the teachers were a little unwilling to let her go. After all, this was related to the school's ranking. Fu Jiu, if you don't make a decision soon, all of us teachers will write a petition saying that number 1 middle school will not allow a person with bad conduct to be the top student in the school. Fu Jiu put away her phone and played with it in her palm. She ignored them and just stood there with a smile. Every teacher was a little annoyed, because Fu Jiu looked at them as if they were a bunch of clowns. The physics teacher felt it the most. Just when she was about to say something, a graceful and slightly cold voice slowly sounded from the side of the door. Conduct problem? That voice wasn't loud, but it sounded like ice and snow. Only because it was so pleasant to the ears, it gave people a feeling of coldness that was as deep as an ancient well. Hearing that, almost everyone turned around to look. They saw a man standing against the light, wearing a pure black custom-made suit that successfully showed off his good figure. Graceful, luxurious, high above the masses. These were the words that people would instantly think of when they saw a man. Or maybe it wasn't just his figure. Because his whole body seemed to emit a temperament of abstinence and sexiness. He just stood at the door of the office, holding his phone casually, but his eyes were too deep. At that moment, all the light seemed to run into his eyes, like a revolving diamond. Just one glance was enough to sink in. After seeing the man, not only the teachers were all speechless. Even the headmaster stood up suddenly. Young Master Qin, how do you have time to come here? Qin Mo didn't talk to the headmaster, but walked to the youngster's side. He looked at Fu Jiu's face, as if he was confirming something. Fu Jiu appropriately expressed her depression. Qin Mo's eyes turned cold. Was he being bullied? As the youngster's parent, he needed to have a good argument with the teacher. Of course, under normal circumstances, the result of Almighty Qin's theory was annihilation. Young Master Qin, didn't the monthly exam just end? It's a shame that there was a student who cheated this year, but he refused to admit it and insisted that he was tutoring outside. Tell me, which tutor could teach a student from the bottom to a perfect score in just 7 days? This is complete nonsense, but he had evidence to back up his claims. It's really. Qin Mo's face was full of smiles as he looked at Qin Mo. Young Master Qin, didn't the monthly exam just end? It's a shame that there was actually a student who cheated this year, but he insisted that he was tutoring outside. Before the teachers could finish their sentence, Qin Mo interrupted them calmly. Me? The teachers are confused. Me? What does that mean? I am his tutor. Speaking of this, Qin Mo smiled. That smile was different from the one Fu Jiu had seen before. It was truly evil and bloodthirsty. As he spoke, he stretched out his left hand, and the bodyguard behind him immediately handed over a pile of paper. Fu Jiu, you're the one who's going to die. Qin Mo put the papers on the table, and his black gloves slid across the table. These are the questions I helped him with these few days. You can all take a look. The moment Qin Mo said, I am his tutor, the teachers all froze. Now that they saw the clear words on the paper, a layer of cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. Only now did they realize how cold young Master Qin was looking at them. Chapter 200. How could this be? Who would have thought that Fu Jiu's tutor was young Master Qin? Regret was not enough to express how the teachers were feeling right now. Their faces were all red, and they wanted to find a hole to hide in. This slap in the face was really embarrassing. Because everyone knew how good Qin Mo was, not because of his family background, but because of his inhuman grades and IQ. Looking at those physics questions that had been suppressed, the grade director suddenly remembered that young Master Qin did ask him about the physics course not long ago, and he also mentioned the problem of male and female desk mates. At that time, he always thought that young Master Qin did it for his girlfriend. Now it seemed. Could it be for Fu Jiu? Thinking of this, the grade director's eyes shook violently. They really screwed up today, and it was very likely that they had wrongly accused someone. The physics teacher in Fujio's class wanted to explain for the other teachers. Unfortunately, Almighty Qin was never a person who would give others a chance in this aspect. He took off the black glove on his left hand, lifted his eyelids, and said indifferently, "I heard that the teachers wouldn't let it go until he called his parents over. Since we're done with the tutoring, let's talk about you guys slandering my little brother for cheating." Little brother? Everyone present was shocked again. When did this upstart Fujio become young Master Qin's little brother? Every teacher was speechless at that moment, and their throats felt like they were choked by something. Qin Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. What? You don't want to talk about it? At this point, Qin Mo tilted his head and laughed. His voice was still graceful, but it was bone-chilling. That's not up to you. My little brother is in the rebellious phase of adolescence. Psychologically speaking, this is the time when his mental endurance is at its weakest. As a teacher, if a student gets full marks, you don't praise him, but slander him indiscriminately. This will easily cast a shadow on him. Fujio, although she really shouldn't have interrupted at this time. But how did the Almighty know that she was in the rebellious phase of adolescence? Qin Mo didn't look at the young man's eye contact. Even if he did, he would think that the young man was being bullied. This was the first time he came to school as a parent, so of course he couldn't let things develop like this. He continued to say indifferently, "Director Lee, when did the teaching quality of number 1 middle school fall to this level? As a shareholder, how could I not know?" As soon as the year head heard the man call him out, he broke out in a cold sweat. Young Master Qin, this matter, do you want to settle this privately or publicly?" Qin Mo didn't wait for him to finish. He glanced at the few teachers standing at the side. They seemed to be well-mannered. However, every teacher knew in their hearts that regardless of whether this matter was settled privately or publicly, they would no longer be able to work in number 1 middle school. Especially teacher Zhang, who taught Fujio physics. The blood drained from her face rapidly, and her skin was as pale as a thin piece of paper. "Young Master Qin, we just thought that a poor student wouldn't be able to do so well, so we wanted student Fujio to explain herself. We didn't mean to slander her." Chapter 201. Young Master Qin's question was like, "Do you want your left hand chopped off or your right hand chopped off?" No matter which hand he chopped off, it was the same as chopping off the hand. There was no difference. "Can't choose." Qin Mo retracted his gaze and said faintly, "Then there's no need to choose. Teacher Lee, remove these people's teacher identities and record them in the file." Was this public? The teachers were anxious. Once they were recorded in the file, not only would they not be able to teach at number 1 middle school, they wouldn't even be able to be teachers in the future. "Young Master Qin, I choose private." Teacher Zhang's voice also changed. "You see, I can satisfy any condition Fujio raises. The nature of this matter doesn't need to be recorded in the file. I misunderstood at the beginning." Teacher Zhang's words sounded like she was admitting her mistake, but in fact, she didn't mean to apologize at all. She just kept repeating that it was a misunderstanding. "Oh. You chose private?" Qin Mo raised his eyes and glanced in her direction. He raised his voice slightly and said carelessly, "Then, Teacher Zhang, please be prepared to go through the legal process. As Fujio's parent, I will sue you for slandering and ridiculing a student." Teacher Zhang was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that this was what young Master Qin meant by private. Her parents were both from the bureau. She didn't want to be recorded in the file because once she was recorded in the file, she couldn't be transferred to the administrative department as a teacher. But now, a teacher who had been sued by someone couldn't be a civil servant anymore. This time, Fujio really saw the Almighty's way of teaching people a lesson. It seemed that the Almighty was telling the truth when he said he would give in to her. It felt good to have a big brother to protect her. Thinking of this, Fujio raised her head and smiled at Chin Mo. Chin Mo didn't have time to deal with the youngster. The Almighty wouldn't stop until he finished dealing with him. Since he was the biggest shareholder, he had to have a proper meeting with this kind of problem. At the very least, he had to let some people know that his little brother wasn't someone anyone could bully. When the school leaders heard that young Master Chin was here, they all rushed into the small grade office. Fujio looked at the school leaders who were bald in front of their heads. She felt it was funny and couldn't help but curve her thin lips. Chin Mo took a moment to glance at the youngster. With a cold expression, he took a bag from the bodyguard and threw it to him. Fujio looked down and saw that it was dark chocolate imported from France. She ate it happily. She understood the look in the Almighty's eyes. He wanted her to wait here. Instead, Director Li, who had just been scolded, saw young Master Chin leading a few school leaders into the big office inside. She sneaked up to Fujio and said in a low voice, "Well, student Fujio, next week, the school will have a very small parent-teacher conference, and the parents of the top 10 students in the monthly test will be praised. Will young Master Chin attend as your parent?" Fujio held the chocolate in her mouth and said casually, "Probably not." Director Li muttered softly, "But young Master Chin seems to really like being a parent." Hearing that, Fujio stopped what she was doing and thought about it. They couldn't help but look at each other, and the scene of young Master Chin attending the parent-teacher conference appeared in their minds at the same time. In the end, Director Li decisively gave up. "I will immediately inform the grade to cancel this parent-teacher conference and change it to a letter format." Okay. Fujio also felt that as a school shareholder, the Almighty was indeed not suitable to attend the parent-teacher conference. Chapter 202. The school leaders were now experiencing what it meant to be a cold winter. Chin Mo sat on the leather chair with a calm expression on his face, but every word he said struck them straight in their hearts. The school leaders' hands were shaking when they left. From that day on, the school began to treat all students equally, regardless of whether they were good or bad. They would take care of those who needed to be disciplined, but they wouldn't discriminate against bad students. If any teacher still existed, they would be fired immediately. In the classroom, some students who didn't understand had already left. Only Shui Yaoyao was still waiting. After all, His Highness Zhou's bag was still there, so he would come back sooner or later. She was worried that the physics teacher called His Highness Zhou away. Could it be that there was something wrong with the monthly test? Everyone who participated in the esports competition knew that the results of this monthly test were very important to them. If something happened to His Highness Zhou, then their team, without His Highness Zhou, the He family army, would no longer have any meaning. Shui Yaoyao thought of this and stood up. She wanted to go to the office to have a look. As soon as the wooden door opened, she saw the clean and handsome face of the young man. Shui Yaoyao's eyes lit up. "His Highness Zhou, are you okay? The teacher called you." Before she could finish, she saw the man behind the young man and stopped abruptly. Almighty Chin. Why was he here? It wasn't hard to see the surprise on Shui Yaoyao's face. But Fujio just smiled lightly. "I'm fine. I came to get my bag." With that, Fujio walked over, casually pulled her left hand, and threw the bag over her shoulder. She still had one hand in her trouser pocket. That posture was always very cool. After all, Shui Yaoyao knew Fujio's gender. She felt a little guilty when she saw Almighty Chin, but after seeing the series of actions of His Highness Zhou, she felt that there was no need to feel guilty. His Highness Zhou's handsomeness was something that others couldn't learn. Almighty Chin probably wouldn't think that His Highness Zhou was a girl. "Let's go together." Fujio walked back and touched Shui Yaoyao's head. "Brother Mo and I will send you back." She touched her head. Shui Yaoyao blushed. Even though she knew that His Highness Zhou was a girl, she couldn't help but be attracted by that tone. But as soon as she looked up, she saw Almighty Chin's cold and handsome face. His gaze swept over Highness Zhou's hand, and his thin lips seemed to be raised. But Shui Yaoyao felt the coldness in his smile, and her scalp went numb. She immediately said, "Your Highness Jiu, you don't have to send me off. I also have an appointment with a classmate to eat ice, so I'll be leaving first. See you later." Almighty Qin's gaze was too terrifying. It was even more terrifying than before. Just because His Highness Jiu touched her head. Thinking of this, Shui Yaoyao couldn't help but look back. When she saw that godlike face, she immediately retracted her gaze. It was still too scary. Fu Jiu looked at Shui Yaoyao's back view in confusion, as if there was a devil chasing after her. She raised her pretty eyebrows in confusion. Qin Mo didn't make any unnecessary movements. He reached out and grabbed the back of the youngster's collar, calmly dragging the youngster into the car. Fortunately, it was late and there weren't many people in the school. Otherwise, the students would have seen the scene of the youngster being carried away like a sack by Qin Mo. It looked like a master disciplining a naughty kitten. Chapter 203. Only then did Fu Jiu realize that the Almighty had been drinking. Because the moment he got close to her, Qin Mo's breath brushed against her face, and the faint smell of red wine rushed over. Inexplicably, he said, "No matter how good the phone is, it's just a decoration in your hands." Fu Jiu said, with a blank expression. Qin Mo originally planned to discipline the young man, but after seeing Fu Jiu's face, the idea faded a lot. He was an open-minded brother. The rebellious period of youth needed the most care. Obviously, today was not the day to criticize the young man. Thinking of this, Qin Mo withdrew his gaze and ordered the driver, "Go to Milky Way Soho." Milky Way Soho? The mall? Why were they going there? Fu Jiu couldn't keep up with the man's thoughts. Was the Almighty going to take her shopping? Since when did the Almighty's hobby become shopping? Fu Jiu arrived at Milky Way Soho with a stomach full of questions. Two equally handsome people appearing in a mall together always attracted the attention of the people around them with an unexpected heat. Especially among those two, one of the young men liked to smile very much. When he saw the girls who turned around to take pictures of him, he would always look sideways and smile. So handsome. Not only that, but most importantly, in the eyes of the fujoshis, the scene of the handsome man holding the young man's wrist and walking forward was enough for them to imagine countless scenes. Qin Mo had long been used to screaming, so he didn't think about what those fujoshis were screaming about. Fu Jiu heard them. She pointed at herself, then at Qin Mo, and mouthed, "Are we a good match?" The girls were so excited that they were about to go crazy. Fu Jiu thought it was interesting. Looking at the man's black hair, she smiled. If the Almighty knew that others thought he was gay, his expression would definitely be very funny. Qin Mo stopped at a shop that specialized in buying candy. It was obviously inappropriate for him to appear here in a suit. The shop assistant who was greeting the customers was stunned for a moment, and then she laughed again. "Sir, what would you like to order?" Hearing the shop assistant's words, a few kids inside looked over at Almighty Qin and the others. Their round eyes were full of childishness, and their big eyes were full of childishness. "Yes, sir." "Sir, are you here to buy candy as well?" Maybe he bought it for his baby. Yes. It had to be. Sigh, another little friend is going to fall into an adult's sugar-coated bullet. Just like me, if I'm not obedient now, my dad will tell my mom that I eat sweets. He was the one who bought the sweets for me and told me not to tell my mom, saying that these are the little secrets of a man. In the end, I've been tricked. Me too. Who do you think this big brother is trying to trick? Children's conversations were always very cute. Moreover, it was the first time they saw such a cold big brother buying candy. All of them couldn't help but look over curiously. Oh no. The little radishes shrunk their heads. The pretty brother he's holding in his hand heard us. Fu Jiu. You guys are speaking so loudly, it's really hard not to be heard. The shop assistant was so embarrassed that he wanted to ask again, "Sir." Chapter 204. Lollipops? The shop assistant smiled brightly. "Are you buying them for your kid?" Fujio knew that the Almighty was buying them for her the moment she heard the flavor, and she was about to deny it. But the Almighty's cool and magnetic voice came over again, and he said slowly and elegantly, "Yeah, I'm buying them for my kid." The Almighty definitely did it on purpose, or he wouldn't have glanced at her when he said the word, kid. The shop assistant had seen many adults buying candy for kids, but it was rare to see two as young as the two in front of her. She couldn't help but ask, "Sir, how old is your kid? We have to choose candy according to his age, especially since you want a chocolate flavor. This kind of candy is not suitable for young kids." 17. After Chin Mo spat out his age. Not only the shop assistant, but also the kids in the shop were stunned. They asked with their eyes wide open, 17. How old is that? I'm 3 years old this year. 1 3-year-old is 3 years old. 2 3-year-olds are 6 years old. 3 3-year-olds are 9 years old. 4 3-year-olds. 4 3-year-olds. A little radish head was still counting with his fingers. In the end, he became anxious. He puffed up his cheeks and stomped his feet. What if 4 3-year-olds aren't enough? 4 3-year-olds indeed weren't enough. It was really hard for kids. The shop assistant cleared his throat with difficulty, as if he was making a final confirmation. Sir, did you say 17? Not 7. Yeah. After Chin Mo responded, he pushed the young man forward and curled his thin lips. Although his behavior of eating candy is childish like a 7-year-old, his face is indeed 17. Fujio. She was sure that the Almighty came to buy candy just to mock her more vividly. The shop assistant saw the man's movement and realized that the candy was for the young man. He paused and smiled apologetically. Please wait a moment, I'll go get the candy for you. Hearing that, the little boy lowered his head as if he was having an important meeting. He said in a deep voice, Did you see that? That big brother is buying candy for the pretty brother in his hand. I saw it. I think it's a trap. I think it's a trap. It's definitely a trap. Should we tell beautiful brother not to take it? I don't think it's a good idea. Beautiful brother looks like he wants to eat it. Sigh, I can understand him. When I don't have any candy to eat, I have the same expression. Fujio. What's wrong with her expression? Wasn't he still handsome? Also, kids over there, when you whisper to each other, can you lower your volume a little? However, having a big bag of lollipops to eat was indeed a very happy thing. Moreover, this brand of chocolate was very pure. When mixed with sweets, it would create a wonderful taste. After Chin Mo paid the bill, Fujio tore one out and put it in her mouth. With her beautiful silver hair and perfect nose, she looked much more obedient. Chin Mo held his wallet and glanced sideways at the youngster. He pressed his furry head in satisfaction, his expression still noble and cold. You did well this time, but if I see you touching someone's head again, not only will these lollipops be thrown into the dustbin, no one in the entire Jiang city will sell you even half a lollipop. Do you understand what I mean? Chapter 205. That's what I said. This big brother is even more ruthless than my dad. He won't let anyone sell candy to that pretty big brother. It's so scary. Pretty big brother is so pitiful to be his baby. Yeah, so pitiful. The little radishes nodded in unison. The shop assistant was so embarrassed that she was about to explode. Fujio took the candy, supported herself with one hand, and jumped in. Her movements were very handsome. She stood there with her long legs and winked at one of the little girls. She bent down and whispered, Let me tell you a secret. That big brother was drunk. I did all this to make him happy. By the way, look at me, I'm so big. How do I look like his baby? Drunk? The little radishes gathered together again and looked at Almighty Chin, who was standing outside the shop, as if they were looking at an inhuman being. Chin Mo raised his eyebrows. He didn't hear Fu Jiu's words, but he knew it was the youngster's doing. He reached out his left hand and dragged the youngster back. That shop assistant watched with her mouth wide open. She was amazed by the silver-haired youngster's skills. So cool. Was he really not a criminal police officer? You don't even let kids off. Chin Mo's voice was very cold. What a flirtatious guy. Fu Jiu agreed. Brother Mo, don't you think those little radishes are very cute? Chin Mo didn't say anything. He just turned his handsome face sideways and took the youngster to the third floor. Fu Jiu thought at first that the Almighty finally took her to a more normal floor. The second floor was filled with children's clothing. The third floor was very modern, with all kinds of big brands. But why did the Almighty choose CK of all places? It was all underwear, and it hurt her eyes. Go pick two. Chin Mo raised his eyebrows at Fu Jiu, looking very indifferent. Fu Jiu. She was a girl, why would she buy men's underwear? I don't need this. Fu Jiu raised the candy in her hand handsomely. I'm fine with these rewards. If Almighty Chin could accept rejection, he wouldn't be called Almighty Chin. Go pick. Don't always make yourself look soft and white. Fu Jiu. Was the Almighty attacking her inner self instead of her grades? What's wrong with white? Fu Jiu thought that this was a great color, and it should be loved by a germaphobe like the Almighty. Chin Mo glanced sideways, glancing at the youngster. From a psychological point of view, the one at the bottom would like to wear white. Fu Jiu, in such a situation, the shop assistant was still hesitating whether or not to interrupt. Chin Mo had already raised his slender and fair fingers, pointing at a pair of pure black underwear hanging on the far right. That style, I want one. With that said, he turned sideways and glanced between Fu Jiu's legs, curling his thin lips into a mocking smile. Give him the smallest size. Yes, sir. The shop assistant felt that the conversation was back to normal and quickly turned around to pack the packaging. Fu Jiu felt that the way the Almighty looked at her was filled with humiliation towards humanity. I'm medium. The shop assistant paused and turned around, only to see the young man gently smiling at her. Sorry to trouble you, give me a medium size. This. The shop assistant didn't know who to listen to. Chin Mo's expression was indifferent. He didn't say much. Seeing this, the shop assistant naturally sided with the youngster. All right, please wait a moment. Chapter 206. Chin Mo stood there, tall and slender, letting the young man tease his ear. He was dressed in a well-ironed suit, exuding an air of abstinence and indifference. Instead, it was the two girls standing outside who blushed. They really wanted to take pictures of these two handsome guys with their arms around each other's shoulders. Especially the scene of the young man standing on his tiptoes and curling his lips into a smile beside the man's ear. It was so pleasing to the eye that it made people's hearts beat faster. But just as they were about to raise their phones, the man suddenly made a move. He directly grabbed the young man's wrist and pressed him against the fitting room. His tall figure was pressed down, and his waist was elongated. His voice was cold and deep. You want to prove that you're not small? Go in and take off your pants. Big brother will measure it for you. She didn't even have one, so how could she measure it? Fu Jiu suddenly felt that she was in a dangerous situation. How could she forget that Almighty Chin was drunk today, so she couldn't flirt with him casually? Brother Mo, I was wrong. At this moment, she had to retreat in order to advance. I shouldn't have blown air into your ear. Chin Mo raised his eyebrows and looked at the young man's slightly depressed face. Finally, he let go of his hand and said coldly, good that you know. The shop assistant softly said, Sir, the underwear has been wrapped for you. Is there anything else you two would like? Same style, large size. When Chin Mo said this, he looked in Fujio's direction again with faint mockery. It was as if he was saying, do you think you're not small when you're wearing a medium size? Fujio understood that expression. It was a little unnatural, which made her subconsciously want to look at a certain part of the Almighty's body. It was really a little embarrassing. Fujio hid something in her heart, so when the Almighty asked her what else she wanted, she casually pointed at strangely shaped underwear. When did CK have something like this? And it had a pure black cat tail. Chin Mo also noticed the underwear the young man was pointing at. His eyes paused for a moment, and he said faintly, I really didn't know that you liked this kind of stuff. But I can't buy it for you. You're still in puberty, and it's not good for your body to wear too tight, not to mention this kind. At this point, Chin Mo frowned as if he was thinking of an adjective. After thinking for a long time, he finally followed his heart. The shop assistant smiled and covered her mouth, as if she was trying to restrain her respect for the customer. This time, Fujio was really depressed. Shopping with the Almighty had caused her reputation to go down the drain. She had just casually pointed at him. However, the shop assistant didn't seem to think so. When she handed him the shopping bag, she lowered her voice and said gently, I understand, handsome. Next time, you can secretly buy it yourself. Since you're so handsome, I'll give you a 10% discount. Fujio. She really didn't want such a discount. She originally thought that she would be depressed all the way with the Almighty, but unexpectedly, the Almighty suddenly changed his attitude. He pointed at a pure white sweater and asked Fujio to try it on. Fujio also thought that the sweater was pretty good. It was almost winter, and it was more important to wear warm clothes, so she didn't reject it. The fitting room was, of course, locked. With her previous experience, Fujio was very insightful in this regard. Chapter 207. The workmanship and material of the sweater were very exquisite. Just by looking at it, it looked very soft. Not to mention the feeling of wearing it, it felt warm and comfortable. That pure snow-like color might be ruined if worn by someone else. But on Fujio, it only made the young man's snow-white skin and dark eyes look good. In addition to that silver hair and the black ear stud on her porcelain white left ear, she looked up and smiled, and the female shop assistant was stunned. So handsome. As for how handsome she was and how much Fujio suited the color white, people who hadn't seen it wouldn't know. It was as if she was born to be a clothes hanger. Even if it was a Korean version, it wouldn't drag on her. The sweater didn't have a collar, and it showed off her fair collarbones. But Fujio had that devilish, bloodthirsty coolness about her, and it made people's hearts beat wildly when they saw it. Chin Mo, who was sitting on the sofa, heard the sound and looked over. When he saw the young man who was tidying his hair with his left hand, his deep eyes couldn't help but sink. Then, he stood up and walked over to Fujio. His slender fingers moved, and he smoothed the young man's fluffy silver hair. Fujio looked up, and their eyes met. She smiled at Chin Mo, and it was as bright as the first melting of winter snow. That kind of warmth could be felt even on her fingertips. Chin Mo curled up the corner of his lips, and the girls next to him held their faces one by one like they were infatuated. How can someone be so handsome? A handsome couple. Did you see that? When that handsome guy tidied up the silver-haired young man's hair, my heart almost melted. His smile was so gentle, completely different from before. Don't say any more, my health bar is almost empty. The female shop assistant had been in the shop for a long time, and she had good eyesight. Seeing the man like this, she immediately said, actually, we have a bigger size for this sweater. It's very suitable for two brothers to wear together. Sir, would you like to buy one? Hearing that, Chin Mo raised his good-looking eyebrows. He remembered his conversation with Boss Lee before. The rebellious young man always liked to get more attention. Although he didn't consider wearing a brother outfit, it was still a good way to get closer to him. Okay. Hearing this word, Fu Jiu was somewhat surprised. After all, a person like the Almighty usually wore a suit or a uniform of dark colors. She didn't expect him to accept white. The sweater that Qin Mo wore was completely different from Fu Jiu's. Even though they both looked handsome, Almighty Qin made people feel cold and noble, and the unique design of the wide sleeves made him look like a vampire aristocrat. One slap on the face was enough to make women go crazy. But when the young man was standing beside him, the girls couldn't help but get rid of that thought. Because compared to snatching the man over, she always felt that the two of them looked more sweet. With two equally outstanding people wearing the same clothes, it didn't take long for them to cause a sensation among the girls. Fortunately, Almighty Qin's actions were quick and didn't give the media a chance to take a picture of him. However, Secretary Liang, who had received orders to wait in the car, was completely stunned when he saw the clothes of the two people. What did he see? Love, couple outfit. Chapter 208. Of course, Qin Mo also noticed Secretary Liang's gaze, so he glanced at him indifferently. That gaze was extremely cold. Secretary Liang shivered and swallowed the question in his mouth with difficulty. He looked at the shining white sweater in the rearview mirror. There would be an esports interview later. If CEO Qin appeared in front of everyone in this outfit, he would definitely attract a lot of attention. After all, CEO Qin had never dressed like this in front of others. After walking around for so long, Fu Jiu was already hungry. Qin Mo heard the young man's stomach rumble, so he asked someone to buy a bunch of food and threw them all into the young man's arms. Which one do you want to eat? Pick one. Fu Jiu was not a picky eater, and she loved meat the most. She took a bite of the chicken burger from Burger King. Burgers paired with Coke were the best. Fu Jiu's handsome face puffed up as she ate. Qin Mo frowned. Secretary Liang thought that CEO Qin would teach the young man not to eat in the car and to eat at home. After all, CEO Qin was a clean freak, and everyone in Jiang City knew about it. To his surprise, CEO Qin didn't say anything. Instead, he picked up a tissue and wiped the young man's mouth with disgust. Go to the Fu house first. Yes, young master. The driver heard Qin Mo's order and turned the car around. Fu Jiu lifted the corner of her eyes and glanced at the man who was still working on documents. She thought that the Almighty hadn't eaten since just now, so she took out a French fry and put it on his lips. Qin Mo didn't eat this kind of junk food, but the young man was in his rebellious phase, so it was best not to reject him. He opened his mouth and took a bite. It tasted good, so he let the young man do whatever he wanted. Secretary Liang felt like he had been hit the hardest the whole time, until he sent the young man home. His CEO was still warning in a low voice, with his deep and charming eyes. Stop flirting with people. Take a day off. The esports competition is the day after tomorrow. I'll be on the top floor of the Qin group. Get the uniform and wait for you. Yes. This was the first time Fu Jiu responded to Qin Mo. Not for anything else, but because she felt that it was a very exciting thing to be teammates with a god. Secretary Liang didn't understand. He couldn't help but look back, thinking, CEO, you don't look like you're teaching your brother. After the Hummer drove away, Fu Jiu walked towards the villa. Honghua sat at home and didn't know about Fu Jiu's results. She glanced at the registration on the website again, but in her heart, she was thinking that if it really didn't work out, she would voluntarily withdraw from the competition. Honghua was very clear about their grades. They could barely pass the rest of the exams, but they only scored a little more than 10 points in physics. She had never been to school and did not know what physics was. However, if this name list really appeared on the day of the esports competition and Jiu was unable to participate due to his results, then Jiu would be attacked even more. In the past, He Honghua had also thought about letting the child get better grades, but she firmly believed that there were only so many years in a person's life. Now that Jiu was so obedient, she would let the child do whatever he wanted. To her surprise, before He Honghua could make a decision, her home phone rang. It was a call from the school. "Hello, Miss He. I am." Chapter 209. First in the whole grade. He Honghua's face was full of indescribable shock. At that moment, she even suspected that there was something wrong with her ears. The phone was still ringing. "Hello? Miss He? Are you still there? Miss He? He Honghua came back to her senses and asked hesitantly, "How many Fujios are there in number 1 middle school?" "Teacher, did you call the wrong number?" "How could that be?" The teacher chuckled. "There is only one Fujio in the whole school, and this is his home phone number." He Honghua couldn't hold back her excitement. You mean my Jiu really got first in the exam?" "Of course it's true. The results will be announced in the form of posters in the whole school tomorrow. The most important thing now is his application for the competition. This kind of extracurricular competition usually requires the consent of the parents. I called you this time mainly to talk to Ms. He about this." "I agree." He Honghua's face was red, and she was so happy that even her tone changed. "As long as the school doesn't have any problems, I will agree with whatever my Jiu does." The teacher knew that He Honghua spoiled her children, but she didn't know who spread this rumor to demonize Fujio's mother. In their eyes, He Honghua became an unreasonable country girl. Not only was she uncultured, but she also thought that whatever their son did was right. This time, after a short phone call, the teacher realized that He Honghua wasn't what she thought she was. Although this middle-aged woman wasn't cultured, she wasn't arrogant. Instead, she was very polite. Even if she spoiled her children, it was only under the school's permission. And who wouldn't spoil a child like Fujio? The teacher was also a mother. She was watching the previous interview when she called. Fujio's short words made her realize that this young man deserved to be spoiled by anyone. Fujio pushed the door open and saw He Honghua's happy face. It was said that women were no different from children when they got older. This was especially true after He Honghua got close to her Jiu. After seeing Fujio, she circled around Fujio like a little girl. "Jiu, I got a call from your school. The teacher praised you for a long time and said that I was good at teaching children. Dear Mrs. He, you've always been good at teaching children." Fujio pulled He Honghua over and sat down with a smile. "Otherwise, how did I get such an excellent product?" He Honghua heard this and smiled even sweeter. "Yeah. That was the logic." Chen Xiaodong, who had just walked in, didn't know what was going on. He saw that his young master was coaxing his wife like a girlfriend. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Why did he always feel that after he woke up from the hospital, he became more and more like a monster? The exam papers had just been handed out today. Could it be that young master didn't do well on the exam, so he gave madam a warning in advance? Chen Xiaodong thought to himself, even if young master doesn't do well in the exam, it doesn't matter. If young master can be as sensible as he is now, I will follow young master for a lifetime. Chapter 210. Fujio sat on the sofa, still wearing her school uniform. She casually put one hand on the back of the sofa, looking devilishly handsome from head to toe. "Who told you that I was worried about my mom knowing about my results?" Chen Xiaodong's eyes lit up when he heard that. "Did young master advance by 1 rank? That's great. What do you mean advance by 1 rank? He Honghua walked over with a round face. She couldn't hide the smile in her eyes. Our Jiu got first place in the whole grade. First, in the whole grade? Chen Xiaodong was petrified. The first place in the whole grade who got full marks in all 5 subjects was their young master. What on earth did young master eat to become so powerful all of a sudden? Could it be because of young master Qin? It was said that the power of love was great. He didn't believe it before, but now that he saw his young master, he believed everything. That young master who didn't even know how to touch a computer now locked himself in his bedroom and played games all day. Not only that, but there were also physics exercises. When did young master study so obediently? All these changes were because of young master Qin. For the sake of Madam's happiness, he would keep this secret to himself, but Honghua wasn't worried about this. Instead, she asked, Jiu, I saw the registration on the website system. Where did your team come from? Do they all know how to play games? Of course. Fu Jiu chuckled. Mom, leave the competition to me. Just stay at home and rest. Honghua thought that her Jiu's definition of how to play games was different from hers. She was talking about a professional. Even if he wasn't a professional, he would at least be a god. But as long as Jiu was happy, she could do whatever she wanted. Honghua's biggest wish was to make her child happy, no matter what. At this moment, in a big hotel in the west of Jiang City, Fu Zhongyi specially held a small cocktail party to promote Fu Ximing. Other than the Fu family's business partners and school leaders, there were also Fu Ximing's friends from other teams. So naturally, the media would come after hearing the news. Young Master Fu, I heard that you are very confident about this esports selection contest. When the reporter was interviewing, he had a smile on his face. It was obvious that he was here to support Fu Ximing. Fu Ximing was wearing a pure white suit. His small face had a unique arrogance. Of course, I believe in my strength, and I believe in the strength of our team even more. The esports selection contest is just a beginner's competition. Of course, we will win. I believe that. The reporter said passionately. This time, the Fu Corporation has recruited quite a number of almighties into the team. Even young Master Fu himself is a famous almighty in the game. As for who it is, I can't say yet. But overall, this is definitely an esports competition worth looking forward to. This was the industry. Apart from having some ability, one also needed to know how to package and create hype. Under his mother's influence, Fu Ximing had learned how to behave. Fu Zhongyi, on the other hand, looked at his proud youngest son and couldn't help but be delighted. When he received the guests, his face was full of smiles. The leaders of No. 1 middle school also walked over. Chapter 211. The school leader gave Fu Zhongyi enough face and said with a smile, Boss Fu, you really know how to educate your child. The results this time are so good that it's shocking. The school wanted to hold a parent-teacher conference, but we cancelled it because we were afraid that it would affect the students' studies. But Boss Fu, sometimes you should really go to the school and tell them how you raised your child. Fu Zhongyi heard that and thought that the school leader was praising his youngest son. His face became even more proud, but he still said modestly, you flatter me. Ximing has been sensible since he was young. Whether it's in games or studies, he has never let me down. This child is so capable that even I, as his father, have benefited from it. Who knew that when the school leader heard this, he froze in an instant. He cleared his throat awkwardly and said, well, Boss Fu, I was talking about your eldest son, Fu Jiu. Him. Fu Zhongyi's expression was blank for a moment. After all, he never expected that the other party would bring up that useless loser. When Fu Ximing heard the name Fu Jiu, he wanted to skin the other party's bones. He stood there and laughed arrogantly. So the director is talking about my big brother? Looks like my big brother is finally a little more sensible this time. He knows how to study. If the director is praising him like this, his results must be pretty good. He is in the bottom 20. The results will be announced tomorrow. But your big brother is much better than you think. The director's expression changed when he talked about Fu Jiu. I've never seen such a smart student. He got full marks in all 5 subjects. I was the supervisor when he took the English exam, and he handed it in less than an hour. That English essay was so beautiful. As the top student in the whole grade, except for young Master Chin, he didn't surpass anyone else. Boss Fu, your eldest son is too low-key. Otherwise, he would have definitely become a popular figure in school. Even my daughter, who is in junior high, is crazy about him. She asks me to take her to see the latest school hunk every day. I don't know where these kids found this picture, but they said that they should look up to His Highness Joe in the future. Not only must they be handsome, but they must also have a good character. Speaking of which, my daughter really became a lot more sensible after that. Is this the legendary power of idols? Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. The director was a straightforward person. He laughed out loud at the end, and he didn't notice that Fu Zhongyi and Fu Ximing's faces turned green after hearing his words. Especially Fu Ximing. He clenched his fists, and his fingertips dug into his palms. He was clenching his fists tightly. The director's words really made him feel like someone had slapped him in the face. It was burning and embarrassing. Top student in the grade. That trash. How could it be? What power of idols? He knew better than anyone else what kind of a freak that was. He was a man himself, but when he saw someone taller and stronger than him, he couldn't move his eyes away. He would throw money around and show off his wealth. What right did such a good-for-nothing have to be a popular figure in the school? Fu Ximing narrowed his eyes. After the esports competition was over and King destroyed He Honghua's stupid company, he would come back and teach that blind piece of trash a lesson. The next day, as soon as the poster was announced, all the students in number 1 middle school gathered around. Chapter 212. These people were a little pretentious. He always felt that if he excelled in his studies, he would look down on this and that. He even felt that he was very righteous. No matter how good Fu Jiu was or how handsome she was, if she didn't have good grades, they would still be against her. His expression was one of, I just don't like you. Nobody actually cared whether they liked it or not. Everything was because they thought they were very important, so even when looking at the results, they would put on an arrogant face. After they saw their own results, they looked at the last place, so that they could find another chance to mock those who liked Fu Jiu. But he couldn't find it. They counted from the back to the front, but they couldn't find the name that they thought would appear. Instead, when he raised his head, the most eye-catching thing was the youth's photo. That group of people's expressions changed. This year, the first place in the whole grade had an unbelievable result, and they had all heard about it from their teachers. But they didn't expect that the unbelievable person was actually Fu Jiu. The Fu Jiu that they thought was trash. In an instant, this news blew up in the school hunk selection thread. Who said that Our Highness Jiu only has looks? Look at this score. Holy sh*t, how did you get full marks in your English test? What an amazing score. Number 1 middle school is really amazing. On the campus forum, there were not only students from the same school, but also students from other schools. Those who liked Fu Jiu were proud that His Highness Jiu had received more praises. However, there were still people who sneered. This kind of results might have been copied. What's there to be proud of? He still doesn't know anything. If I were to say that the school hunk should be Almighty Qin. Have you all forgotten about Almighty Qin? Almighty Qin is no longer on campus. At least find someone like Almighty Qin. What's so special about this Fu Jiu? Compared to Almighty Qin, it was like heaven and earth. To the one above, please don't compare the two. I like Almighty Qin too. I believe that with Almighty Qin's character, he wouldn't want to see anyone step on another person when they like him. Hee, step on. Is Fu Jiu worth stepping on? You even deleted my comment? It's useless even if I delete it. What I said is the truth. A gay wants to be the school hunk. Those who like Fu Jiu are all crazy. If you ask me, only Fu Ximing from our class deserves the title of the new school hunk. Do you know how awesome he is? Not to mention his exam results, he was a god-level character and hero. Like Almighty Qin, he was a professional player. On the list of the esports selection contest this time, he was the captain of the team. Just the number of god-level players under him was uncountable. Only this kind of person is worthy of being the school hunk, okay? It's just that he's more low-key, unlike your Highness Jiu, who just got a little better in the exam and still has to make it known everywhere. I just chuckle. Shui Yaoyao came to find Fu Jiu today because she wanted His Highness Jiu to take a look at the posts about her on the forum. It was supposed to be a happy thing, but she didn't expect that things would turn out this way. Even if the other party wanted to flatter Fu Ximing, there was no need to say such things about His Highness Jiu, right? Her fingers moved angrily, and she was about to type a reply. Chapter 213. Shui Yaoyao looked up and stared blankly at the excessively handsome young man in front of her. Fu Jiu chuckled and continued, "Don't forget, our goal is to dominate the entire selection contest." It was because of the young man's devilishly handsome attitude that made people's blood boil with excitement. In the beginning, she played hero because she wanted to find some friendliness and comfort in the game world that she couldn't find in real life. But now, she not only found it, but also learned to fight and be strong. This was a battlefield. If His Highness Jiu was the king, then they were his loyal knights. Every one of us would tell ourselves that. If I were strong enough, I would face humiliation and ridicule, and I would say loudly, no. This competition was not just a simple game. They had to fight for their dignity. Would tomorrow, when people found out about His Highness Jiu and Spade Z's identity, they wouldn't look at her in such a strange way? The night before the competition, there were bound to be people who couldn't sleep well. Shui Yaoyao was the first. After she finished a math problem, she forced herself to go to bed early, but she couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard she tossed and turned. Finally, she sat up and started to study the technique Fu Jiu taught her. Feng Shang was also in the same state. He sat in front of the computer, but he didn't play any games. He just looked at the game character on the screen, and then he glanced sideways at the place on the calendar that was heavily circled with a red circle. Being a professional player. That was something he didn't even dare to dream of before. Feng Shang lowered his head and clenched the mouse in his hand. Without his glasses, he was really too handsome. People were still playing games in the internet cafe, and Hero's page was hanging high up on the screen. Someone knocked on the counter. Boss? Hi, boss. What are you doing? Give me a Coke. Yin Wuyao didn't say anything. With a cigarette in his mouth, he handed over the Coke. That person touched his chin and asked, "What's wrong with the boss today?" "I don't know. He looks different from usual, and I heard that the internet cafe will be locked at 10:30 today." Damn. So early. I was going to pull an all-nighter. I've never seen an internet cafe that doesn't open at night. Our boss is so capricious. Yin Wuyao flicked the cigarette butt. What are you talking about? Brats, pack up and get ready to close. Are you really going to close the door? No, boss, uncle. Where are you planning to go? Aren't you going to open the internet cafe? Yin Wuyao paused, taking his jacket and flinging it over his shoulder. Uncle, I'm going back to my old profession, playing in the professional league. Yin Wuyao walked out of the internet cafe after saying that, leaving behind a group of dumbfounded people. Did you hear that? The boss said he was going to play in the professional league. Could the boss be joking? At his age, it's unlikely. It was too cold outside the internet cafe. Yin Wuyao started to regret running out on impulse. He wasn't young anymore. In the words of a child, his hand speed and eyesight had long since fallen behind in a professional team. Why was a 30-year-old uncle still jumping around? However, his body couldn't help but reignite that hot blood in his body. Chapter 214. This reminded Yin Wuyao of the earliest times when he played hero. At that time, many people who played games were not understood. It wasn't like now, where a great god would be sought after by everyone. In the past 6 years, in the eyes of most people, anyone who had anything to do with computers was a loafer. Esports would always be rejected in China. Therefore, whether it was his relatives or classmates, the first thing they saw when they mentioned that he worked in the game industry was subtle disdain. Playing games can also earn money. Spending money is more like it. Such a person is a glutton and lazy person. He won't have much success in the future. Yin Wuyao sat on the railing outside the internet cafe, cocking his head and lighting a cigarette. Even he himself did not understand why he would think of something so long ago today. How many people say, he is not practical. He gritted his teeth and persevered. He thought that one day, he would prove to everyone that what he was doing was called esports and not just a game. Finally, he entered a pro team. He thought that he could finally shine. However, in just half a year, in the short span of half a year, all of his passion for this industry had been obliterated. It turned out that you didn't have to play the game well to make a name for yourself. How to promote, whether or not your agent will support you, the competition between people in the same industry, and the betrayal of your closest comrades in order to steal fans. Yin Wuyao stubbed out the cigarette in his hand. Just as he was about to enter, his phone's screen lit up. It was a message from their temporary team's WeChat group. 999 brand lollipop, can't you all sleep? Come out, I have gifts for you. What a child, a high school student. Yin Wuyao snorted, but his lips curled into a smile. With a cigarette in his mouth, he put on his hat and ran towards the address that the youth had sent to the group. There weren't many cars on the road at night. Especially in the north, like Rivertown, the colder it was, the fewer people there were. However, for some reason, his chest and palms were burning hot. Feng Sheng put on his coat and left. Shui Yaoyao also left at the same time. It was as if no matter how dark or cold it was outside, at that moment, even their eyes were bright. And what attracted them was the young man standing in the empty square of Chang'an Street. That tall and slender, his back straight and straight, wearing a black leather jacket and short silver hair, he leaned against a pure black Land Rover. After 11:00 in the evening, there were not so many cars on Chang'an Street. Therefore, even the sound of breathing while running could be heard clearly. Shui Yaoyao took the last train while Feng Sheng drove and Yin Wuyao took a taxi. The three of them came from the north, south, and east respectively. He didn't know if it was because he was running too fast, or because of the figure that emitted light even under the night sky. His heart was beating so fast that it felt a little tight. That kind of feeling didn't only occur when one was in love or missing someone. And it was now that they saw their companions and smiled at each other. Fu Jiu smiled as well. She walked over from the other side and raised her hand. The trunk and car lights were turned on at the same time. Under the dazzling light, all the rose petals that were pressed against the back of the car gushed out, just like a scene from a comic. Both Shui Yaoyao and Feng Sheng were stunned when they saw this. It seemed to be the most beautiful scene they had ever seen. Chapter 215. Team Uniform. Shui Yaoyao never thought that His Highness Jiu would give them this as a gift. When she turned her head to look, even the handsome Uncle Yin Wuyao's eyes changed when he saw the uniform in his hands. Needless to say, Feng Sheng's fingers trembled when he touched the fabric in his hands. He had seen too many players trained by his brother. Every time he watched a professional league match, he would think that those people were so handsome when they sat in front of the computer in their uniforms, typing on the keyboard, and waving the mouse. If he didn't stutter, his life might not be like this. But it was inevitable that he felt inferior. In fact, before he met his idol, he was afraid to communicate with others. When Feng Sheng thought of this, he raised his eyes and looked at the smiling young man with his hands in his trouser pockets. Fu Jiu looked back at him. She raised her hand and put on the uniform that belonged to her. The quality of the uniform was very good, and it was obviously custom-made. The smooth lines slid down the shoulders, and with that handsome and fair face, she looked cool and noble. Shui Yao Yao and Yin Wu Yao looked at each other and pulled up the zipper. 4 people of different heights, all wearing the same uniform, stood in the middle of the square. Their feet stepped on the car lights, and the rose petals didn't fall for a long time. The next day, all kinds of news about the selection contest swept across the internet. Even if there was no news, there was still some news. After all, this was the most anticipated competition for everyone who played Hero. People who didn't play games wouldn't understand what it meant to change from a non-professional player to a professional player. What's more, the person standing on the top floor waiting for the new contestants was none other than the most valuable professional player in the esports world, Qin Mo. Just hearing his name could make people's blood boil. Not to mention that almighty Qin would be on camera the whole time. In the words of the media, this was the era of all-stars. The popularity of a professional team was no less than that of some actors, and it could even create an extraordinary amount of discussion. One of the live streaming platforms had already broken 10 million online users in the morning. Each of them had their own team that they supported, and the big clubs had sent out messages in advance about who would participate in the competition. On this day, the internet cafe was unusually quiet. Everyone was holding a beer or Coke, looking up at the big screen in front of them. The tickets for the selection contest had been on sale since a week ago, and the price was getting more and more expensive day by day. Until today, there were still people who wanted to buy tickets. The reason why these people were like this was because they were all waiting for the same scene, the members of the various battle teams entering the arena. Such a grand competition guaranteed absolute viewership ratings. The media had already picked up their cameras, and the staff at the venue were making hand signals. In the middle of the venue, there were rows of computers. They were all made of top-notch equipment, and even the headphones hanging on them were black in color. The scene was no less than a star-studded movie. Sound engineer in position. Lighting technician in position. Commentator in position. Okay, all teams get ready. The countdown begins. The chief director of the competition, dressed in a black cotton-padded jacket, stood in the darkest corner, holding a loudspeaker in his hand. 3. When the director shouted, 2, Fu Jiu, who was standing in the tunnel on the far right, tilted her head. Her side profile was handsome, and her gaze was cool. Are you ready? The 3 nodded in unison. Chapter 2:16. Bang! Lights gathered. Everyone sitting in the audience stand stood up and looked at the home court. 12 teams entered the arena. 4 people for one team. There were a total of 48. There were both men and women in the team. The women were usually very young, and their average age was no more than 92 years old. And the tougher the character in the game, the sweeter the character was, the sweeter the player was. This was the contrast of cuteness that the star-making team emphasized. To be honest, when there was a girl on stage, the first person people saw was a girl. But today, their gazes involuntarily landed on the silver-haired youth. There were girls in the audience, and they almost fell for him at first glance. Who is that? He's so handsome. I don't know. I've never seen him before. Such a handsome person has never been on a live broadcast. This doesn't make sense. What about his team? Do you recognize him from his clothes? I've never seen him before. Not only the female audience, but even the director couldn't help but give the young man a close-up. Not because of anything else, but because of the evil smile on his face. Give this guy more screen time. If this kid plays well, he will definitely become famous. The people backstage were still working. Fu Jiu had a lollipop in her mouth and one hand in her pocket. She led her team to the registration counter. The whole competition would be broadcasted live, and the game name would be shown to all the hero fans in the country. Both He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong followed her out of the country as agents, but they were not at ease. They were afraid that Fu Jiu couldn't accept failure, so before she came out, they said on the way, "Jiu, this competition is just for fun. The most important thing is to participate. Winning or losing isn't important. The most important thing is that you are happy." Chen Xiaodong's way of comforting people was always different from others. Young Master Qin has already accepted you. It doesn't matter even if you are not so addicted to games. People who have slept with you are always better at sleeping with you. Don't worry, no matter whether you win or lose, I will never tell Madam that you are participating for young Master Qin. Fu Jiu glanced at him and hooked his neck with her left hand. Lose? Your young master never loses, understand? He Honghua and Chen Xiaodong didn't say anything else. In their hearts, they only treated Fu Jiu as a child and asked him to go out and explore the world. They had seen those team members before. One blushed as soon as he saw them, and another blushed even when he had a cigarette in his mouth. The only girl was even more likable. But these 4 people. Did they really understand the meaning of the esports selection contest? Besides, Spade Z was definitely not going to appear. He Honghua glanced at the entrance of the passageway again and finally set her eyes on the young man who had caught everyone's attention the moment he appeared. Although He Honghua knew that they were just fooling around, she still couldn't help but clench her fists and whisper, "Jiu, you can do it." He hoped that these children could win. Even if they could only win one match, at least they wouldn't have any regrets. Chapter 217. However, the Fu family's team members, who were also causing a sensation, frowned heavily when they saw Fu Jiu. What's going on? Why is this trash calling for a competition? He Honghua probably couldn't find anyone to join her team, so she found a few random players from somewhere and formed a team. Even if she wants to form a team, she doesn't need to find this trash. Those guys are not bad looking, but they are too arrogant. That wasn't enough. He purposely stood in front of Fu Jiu, raised his eyebrows, and smiled with obvious disdain. I didn't expect that someone would still dare to show off after what happened to him. It seems like he hasn't been beaten into submission yet. He must have forgotten how he begged for mercy in school. Otherwise, he would be scared out of his wits. Isn't that right, young Master Fu? As he spoke, he turned to look behind him. Fu Ximing was the prettiest among them, but his little face was still as arrogant as ever. He pretended to be cold as he glanced at Fu Jiu, as if he didn't care about anyone. Why are you talking so much to a layman? Go write your game name and get on the computer. Young Master Fu is right. There's really nothing to talk about with a layman. Apart from Fu Ximing, 2 of the contestants sent by the Fu family were poached from He Honghua's side. Now, it was one of them who answered. Yin Wuyao was a hot-tempered person, and he wanted to beat Fu Jiu up the moment he heard that. Fu Jiu raised her hand and grabbed his wrist. She looked at Fu Ximing and said in a light voice, "Beaten into submission? The one beaten into submission should be the classmate you sent, right? Why? Didn't your young master Fu tell you how I slapped him in the face with the phone?" As soon as Fu Ximing heard that, his expression turned ugly. The more Fu Jiu behaved like this, the more embarrassed he felt when he recalled what happened that day. The other 3 didn't know what was going on. Then they heard Fu Ximing say coldly, "He can only show off for now. When the competition starts, you can fight him however you want. Now, let's go." The Fu family had invited a reporter they were close to. Fu Ximing led his team to the registration area and was immediately surrounded by the media. These were all included in the content of the live broadcast. The difference was that this wasn't a stage, so there would be other interviews during the registration. Yin Wuyao looked at the backs of those people and was still unhappy. His thin lips twitched. Who is that kid? So arrogant? No wonder old Yao doesn't know. He's still young. When you were playing in the team, he was still drinking milk. Fu Jiu looked sideways and curled up the corner of her mouth. How is it? Seeing such a person who deserves to be beaten up, will it motivate you? Yin Wuyao tilted his head. Very capable. Then go write your name. Fu Jiu walked over. The people on Fu Ximing's side saw this and mocked them. How many people would know a wild army's name in the game? Even if it was written, it would be placed at the end of the competition, and it wouldn't get any screen time. The esports selection contest was different from other competitions. Revealing the game name was also a unique attraction of the competition system. Who were the gods that they were familiar with in the game? Chapter 218. Many people had already stretched their necks, staring at the name and the corresponding contestant on the screen. That kind of excitement and agitation was indescribable. The people waiting to watch in the internet cafe clenched the can of Coke in their hands, just to see what the Almighty in their hearts looked like in real life. The most important thing was, Spade Z was very likely to be among them. A large part of the reason why there were no empty seats was because there were too many anti-fans, and every single one of them was waiting for Spade Z to show up. The media that the Fu family had invited also focused all their attention on Fu Ximing. Even manager Feng from the Qin Group Club was staring at those professional teams. Plus, there were too many people, so he didn't see Feng Shang. The main reason was that Feng Yi never thought that his brother, who liked to stay at home, would appear in the professional arena. After all, Feng Yi had wanted to bring him here before, but Feng Shang never came. He just watched the live broadcast. In other words, other than He Honghua and Qin Xiaodong, no one's eyes were on the He family army. No. There was one more person. He stood at the top of the arena, wearing a pure black uniform on his shoulders, and a pure white shirt inside. His deep eyes looked down at the ground, and his handsome and noble face was as cold as ever. And the people below couldn't see him. Only when the video was being broadcasted did the camera switch, and the face that could make people scream was transmitted to various live streaming platforms through the video. Almighty Qin. Oh my God, it's really Almighty Qin. I feel that Almighty Qin has become more handsome in just a few days. Is it my illusion? It's not your imagination. Almighty Qin is getting more handsome every day, but what is he looking at? I feel like he's looking at the registration. He must be looking at me. You know, Almighty Qin has high hopes for me. I'm drunk, don't think too much, okay? Wait a minute, Almighty Qin is really looking at people. How is that possible? Why not? Almighty Qin and Spade Z are often together in the game. Is Almighty Qin looking for Spade Z in the crowd to see what he looks like in person? You mean live gay meetup? Looks like it. It was said that Qin Mo's existence was to witness the existence of the pinnacle of esports. In less than a minute, he had set off a wave of clicks. In just 3 minutes, the number of users on the platform had more than doubled. The media was also prepared to take advantage of this period to create another hot topic. As a result, most of the cameras were pointed at Fu Ximing's team. But at this moment, on the other side, which made people think that it was just a wild army, there was a sudden sound, and the whole screen exploded in red. Everyone couldn't help but look back in shock. On the screen was a player named, North of Yin Mountain, one of the top 5 players in the country. That's right, top 5. People who just started playing Hero might not recognize this name. But all the veteran players who had played for 3 years wanted to take another look at the screen in the middle of the game. After confirming that there was no mistake, the venue fell silent for a second, followed by a shout that came from the chest, Peking University. It really was Peking University. Damn, what should I do? My eyes are red. My favorite pro player is back. Luckily, I didn't give up. I knew that Peking University would definitely come back. Chapter 219. As such an unexpected name suddenly popped out, the reporters at the scene were momentarily stunned. Fu Ximing and the others didn't know what happened. North of Een Mountain. Who was that? At this time, it was time for the commentator to come on. The commentator usually played hero professionally, so of course he was good at crowd control. I'm sure everyone is curious about who North of Een Mountain is. 5 years ago, when Hero wasn't as popular as it was now, a cute kid like me clicked open a video of a national ranking tournament. I still remember that ranking tournament to this day. It was because I saw that person play that I decided to become a professional gamer. That person was none other than North of Een Mountain. But later, for some unknown reason, Peking University left the esports scene, and the name, North of the Mountain Een, never lit up again. I believe that there are many people who feel the same way as me. The one we've been waiting for has finally returned. At the end, the commentator's voice was a bit hoarse. At that moment, some of the people in front of their computers froze. They were not the only ones whose eyes had turned red because of a name. They had only occasionally thought of watching another league match, but their eyes had turned red because of one name. In this world, there will always be such a person. On him, all the memories of your youth are recorded. Even if you get married, have children, and gradually become one of the many people in the world. But when you see that person, you will remember the past that made your blood boil and your eyes light up. North of Een Mountain. That's the kind of person. The crowd was almost out of control. Fortunately, the other commentator joined the industry late. He wiped his partner's face and turned his head to the microphone. He's crying. What should we do? F***CK, I'm not crying. You say you're not crying. Your eyes are red like a rabbit's. Who arranged for you to commentate with me? Didn't you say that since we play together and commentate together, I'm actually in a difficult position? Shut up. Then don't cry. I'll buy you some candy. Listening to those words, not only did the director want to hold his forehead, but even manager Feng dragged his assistant over. Who let them go on stage to explain? Feng, CEO Feng, have you forgotten? You said that the two of them look like a couple. Now, the audience likes to watch them bicker. The most important thing is that the two of them appear together. The click rate is high, manager Feng took a deep breath. Tell them to leave their love for each other at home. What's important now is... Who is North of Een Mountain? Just now, all the cameras were aimed at Fu Ximing's team. They were waiting for them to reveal something, so they didn't move their cameras. Now that he thought about it, the explosion seemed to have come from the west. In other words, he had only heard the sound and did not see who logged in with the name, North of Een Mountain. Fortunately, there were technicians. With a single adjustment, they locked onto the positions of the battle team members who had logged in. Number 31, He Family Army, Yin Wuyao. He Family Army. How could this be? Chapter 220. Chen Xiaodong was also shocked, and the shocked expression on his face was very obvious. So the person young master found, was this good? The people on Fu Ximing's side all opened their eyes wide. They never thought that there would be such a person in that wild army. Fu Ximing's expression changed, and then he said casually, there's nothing strange about this. It's normal for He Honghua to spend money to find a master to shock the scene. As for the others, how can they be so good if they play with Fu Jiu? However, just as Fu Ximing finished speaking, another light exploded on the He family army's side. Awarding you a slap of pleasure, popular player, Glory Zone C, ranked top 7 in the country. Anyone who played Hero would know this ID. This person was not only well-equipped, but he was also a top-notch almighty in ranked matches. Almost in an instant, the sound of discussion swept through the entire arena like a tide. Holy sh**t. Who the hell is this He family army? This player's ranking is too amazing. More than amazing, they're practically poaching the entire almighty in the hero ranking. To be honest, I thought they were just a small amateur team. I didn't expect them to be so good. How come they didn't even dig up their background? Why didn't they even dig out their background? The media friends were almost crying, okay. Our friends from the media are also close to crying, alright. How could they have imagined that a temporary team that should not have appeared in front of the cameras would be able to shock the entire audience? Someone was even yelling, "Follow Big Brother, I'll beat you and take you to the skies." These words were all for Feng Shang. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the awarding you a slap of pleasure in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. After all, they sometimes played ranked matches in the game, and they had fought against each other before. The other's skills and dialogue were too different from his. Wasn't this the real cuteness? Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. Even the female players who came to compete today couldn't believe that the awarding you a slap of pleasure in real life was actually so handsome and delicate. Manager Feng, who was standing in the director's room, looked at the scene on the other side of the glass. His left hand, which was about to give out orders, suddenly stopped. This scene was something that almost no one had expected. First, the Almighty who disappeared 5 years ago came back. Then, it was the RMB Almighty on the super popular rankings. Both of them were from the same team, the He family army. This was a team that no one present had ever heard of before. However, the two people were indeed sitting there, and the computer screen was still emitting a faint blue light, which proved that this matter was true. This time, the director gave the order to change the position of the camera. The member of the Fu family, who was about to log into his account to show the video, stopped in mid-air with an ashen face. They were the most anticipated battle team, but their popularity couldn't compare to a wild team that had appeared out of nowhere. That kind of scene was undoubtedly the most awkward. His face was burning with pain. However, both the audience and the audience outside the arena no longer cared about the Fu's battle team. At this time, almost everyone had the same question in their minds. To be able to gather these two great experts, the captain of this team was definitely not simple. What would his online ID be? Clatter. The faint sound of typing could be heard. Chapter 221. H.E.I. Black. Her fair hands were on the keyboard, and her fingers moved at a surprisingly fast speed. Together with the handsome and evil silver hair of the young man, he was unspeakably cool. Before people could see how the young man was typing, 3 big words appeared on the big screen in the center: Spade Z. Instantly, He Honghua choked. Her mouth was wide open, and she couldn't say a word. She stared blankly at the scene in front of her, and even her black pupils were shocked. Chen Xiaodong's reaction was even more direct, and the support stick in his hand fell to the ground. Spade. Spade Z. His young master was Spade Z. That great god Spade Z who wiped out the whole server. How could this be? Young master was clearly a gamer who didn't even know how to choose a character. Although young master had been working hard recently to chase after young master Qin, locking himself in his room every day to play hero. But how could he be Spade Z? Chen Xiaodong glanced at the silver-haired young man sitting in front of the computer again, and even his fingers began to tremble. He couldn't tell what he was feeling at that moment. Excitement, shock, or disbelief. He couldn't believe it, but the audience gave the most direct reaction. Swoosh. Everyone in the audience stood up. Not only that, but the number of clicks on the online platform soared to the highest point because of the appearance of this game ID. The noise in the internet cafe almost blew the roof off. Everyone clenched the can of cola in their hands, and their eyes were shaking as they looked at the screen. Spade Z. That was Spade Z. Because the reaction was too big, the recorder had to stand up to maintain order. Quiet down, the game account hasn't been logged in yet, everyone quiet down. How could they be quiet? That was their Big Spade. The rookie king Big Spade who swept the FC in Zone C. In fact, they didn't have much hope for the appearance of their Prince Charming. The media also said that the reason why Spade Z was so mysterious was probably because he was ugly and unpresentable. Those words weren't very nice. But now, just by looking at that face, passers-by would become his fans. Too handsome. Too young. Especially when the lollipop was in her mouth and her eyes were lowered as she typed, her thick eyelashes casting a faint shadow under her eyelids. His messy silver hair matched with his black and white combat uniform didn't make him look decadent. Instead, he looked impeccably handsome. Ostentatious, arrogant, and noble. It was as if he could wipe out an entire army with a single move. This was simply making people's blood boil. Was that their Adonis, Spade Z? Everyone held their breath. The cameras were all aimed at the youngster's face. However, there was a beep. Game account login failed. There was only one sentence on the screen: your account or password is incorrect. This news was like a bucket of cold water, extinguishing everyone's enthusiasm. The amazement from before quickly faded from the audience's faces. It wasn't just the people in the stands, even the commentator couldn't hide the astonishment in his eyes. Login failed? What was going on? Yin Wuyao and Feng Shang, who were already sitting in front of the computer, also turned around abruptly and looked at the young man's side profile. Chapter 222. Just when everyone was in a daze, a sneer suddenly came from the Fu family battle team. Ha, what are they doing? Someone even dared to impersonate Spade Z just to attract attention. Aren't you afraid of being kicked out? Impersonate? These two words were like a tornado that engulfed the entire esports arena. The audience did not want such a thing to happen. Especially the haters, but if it wasn't an impersonation, then how could they explain the fact that the youngster couldn't log into the account? For a moment, everyone looked at Fu Jiu differently. From the excitement just now to the suspicion now, there were even traces of disgust in the eyes of some people. Feng Shang panicked. You, don't talk nonsense. The captain is Spade Z. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. There's actually a stutterer here. The people from the Fu family battle team didn't even bother to hide their laughter. Reward you with a punch of consumer delight? I didn't expect you to be like this in real life. How poor was the He family that they had to find a little stutterer to compete? Feng Shang didn't mind hearing those words, but when manager Feng heard those words, he wanted to drag the speaker over through the glass and teach him a lesson. But before he could move, a loud bang was heard. The silver-haired youngster, who had been sitting in front of the computer, kicked his chair away. With one hand in his pocket, he stared coldly at the members of the Fu family and smiled evilly. Who are you calling a stutterer? What right does a person who betrayed his master have to bark? The young man's voice was very pleasant. It was slow and magnetic, and it grabbed everyone's ears as soon as he opened his mouth. After hearing Fu Jiu's words, the man's entire face turned red. He clenched his fists and wanted to say something more. Fu Shiming stretched out his hand to stop him. His face was full of arrogance. There's no need to talk nonsense with someone who wants to impersonate me. Trying to impersonate him? Soon, someone caught the main point of Fu Shiming's words, and an uproar broke out again. What does young Master Fu mean? Could he be the real Spade Z? Thinking about it, the possibility of young Master Fu being Spade Z is very high. Hadn't the media previously reported that he had been internally selected by the Qin Corporation Club? Such a guess seemed to have been confirmed. Everyone began to look at each other in dismay. The audience's perception immediately leaned towards Fu Shiming's side. If that's the case, then Fu Jiu is really shameless. You're shameless to the extreme, okay? Who could impersonate our big Spade so easily? Shui Yaoyao looked at the condemning gazes directed at the youngster, which made her feel extremely uneasy. The saddest thing in the world was to be impersonated, and you still couldn't prove it was you. Little Captain. It wasn't just Shui Yao Yao, even the uncle Yin Wuyao looked worriedly at the young man's side profile. As a mother, He Honghua's heart ached as she looked at the back of the man standing in the middle, who was despised by everyone. It was her baby. She knew her child better than anyone else. In the past, Jill was weak, had low self-esteem, liked to throw tantrums, and liked to throw money around. But her Jill would never impersonate anyone. Chapter 223. At this time, Fu Ximing was already sitting in front of his computer. With a click of his finger, he logged in and entered the game page directly. The light turned red. The record holder of 99 first kills. The first place in the ranking competition. The game ID that had countless glory appeared in front of everyone just like that. Spade Z. The audience shouted this name in unison. Their chests shook with unspeakable excitement. Fu Ximing curled up the corner of his lips in the cheers of the audience. What his mother said was right. The game ID Spade Z was worth spending a lot of money to hire someone to get it. But he really didn't expect that trash to be Spade Z. When Fu Jiu logged in with this game ID just now, he was a little uneasy until someone suggested impersonating him. Then he had a sudden inspiration and came up with such a good idea. In the world of online games, whoever could log in with an ID was the real one. Fu Ximing stood up and glanced at Fu Jiu coldly. When he bought the account, he didn't like this Spade Z. It turned out that there was a reason for his dislike. But now, he was going to use this game ID to completely ruin the He family army's reputation. What could Fu Jiu do? She could only be anxious. He. The smile on Fu Ximing's face became wider. Old gamers like Feng Shang and Yin Wuyao knew at a glance that their captain's account had been tricked. Motherf *cur. Yin Wuyao couldn't help but curse. He left the circle because of the unknown darkness. He didn't expect that when he came back, he would encounter such a disgusting thing right at the beginning. What should he do now? Little Captain was the one who suffered the most, right? Yin Wuyao always said that Fu Jiu was a high school student, like an uncle. But now, he really felt sorry for her. How could he not feel sorry? Those who knew Fu Jiu were all annoyed. Just when the second wave of sarcasm was about to come, they heard a bang. The door that originally led to the top floor was kicked open by someone. Qin Mo, who was wearing a pure black uniform, suddenly appeared at the door. His long legs were straight, and his side profile was so handsome that he seemed to have walked out of a manga. Standing behind him was Secretary Liang, who was panting heavily. He called out worriedly, CEO Qin. This is still a live broadcast. Even if you can't stand others bullying young Master Jiu, you can't be impulsive. The audience fell into silence the moment Qin Mo appeared. Because no one expected Almighty Qin to come down. Although Qin Mo didn't say anything, the corner of his mouth curved coldly, and there was a strong chill in his eyes. With a flick of his finger, he threw the uniform into Secretary Liang's hand. It was obvious that he was going to do it himself. However, Fu Jiu looked back at him with a deep gaze. She just looked at him quietly. Qin Mo stopped in his tracks. The two equally handsome men stared at each other as if no one else was around. Apart from his handsomeness, there were also invisible sparks colliding. No one could understand the twists and turns within. But Qin Mo understood what the youngster meant. He wanted to do it himself. For this, Qin Mo raised his eyebrows. Fu Jiu smiled as well. She touched her thin lips with her fingertips, and her left eye winked seductively. Chapter 224. Seeing that Almighty Qin went back, everyone was confused. What was going on? Logically speaking, Almighty Qin should have kicked whoever pretended to be Spade Z out. Why did he go back? Even Secretary Liang was a bit confused. Just now, CEO Qin's cold aura could almost freeze people's hearts. How come it seemed to have faded away so much? No, that's not right. Rather than saying it faded away, it was more like CEO Qin had suppressed the hostility in his eyes. Secretary Liang didn't think it was a good sign. Usually, the more silent CEO Qin was, the uglier he would die in the end. But what made Secretary Liang feel strange was that CEO Qin still had the patience to stand there and wait. The audience was puzzled as well. They turned to look at the esports arena again. In the midst of all the noise, that young man sat back in front of his computer calmly. His side profile was handsome and indifferent, as if he wasn't the one being despised. Fu Jiu moved her slender fingers and twisted the black microphone on the side. She put it in front of her lips, and her silver hair fell down and covered her eyes. Then, she laughed in a low voice. I didn't expect that my account would be hacked after a few days of not playing. But it doesn't matter. There is a good way to prove who is the real one. While she was talking, her hands were still typing on the keyboard. It was a real blind typing, and her fingers were so beautiful that people gasped. Damn! This person's hands are so fast. The commentator said this, and it wasn't hard to hear the amazement on his face. But it wasn't over yet. As Fu Jiu's fingertips fell, the screen in front of her fell into darkness. Apart from a series of white codes, there was nothing else. What is this? Some people were shocked, and they couldn't believe what they saw. It's a network attack. He is doing a network attack on the spot. This is the first time I've seen a real network attack. It's so cool. Network attack. What do you mean? You don't even know this? He is hacking the official website of Hero. Wait a minute. It seems that not only the official website of Hero, but also the live streaming platform is under his control. Holy sh*t. That was way too awesome. Even if this person isn't Spade Z, I will still be his fan. This hacking skill is simply out of this world. Hacking skills? Are you saying that this person is a hacker? F***ck, brother, look at the code. What's that jumping on the screen? Have some common sense. How can a hacker do this? No matter how excited the crowd was, Fu Jiu's sitting posture was still very calm. She was still sucking on the lollipop, but it didn't affect her evil and cold voice at all. Everyone leaves their real information when they create an account. Although my information is hidden through special means, and no one can find out, even the officials can't see it. But all they need to do is touch the hidden data here, and everything will be revealed. The infiltration process was extremely fast. Before anyone could react, the young man had already pressed the enter key. The beautiful finger technique came to a screeching halt. The rhythmic clattering of the keyboard could no longer be heard on the court. Chapter 225. It was Fu Jiu, not Fu Shiming. In an instant, everyone held their breath. Seeing this, those fans who claimed to love Spade Z and scolded Fu Jiu shut up. Instead, some people who didn't say anything just now suddenly shouted, "My big Spade is so handsome." This was a direct acknowledgement of Fu Jiu's identity. In fact, the audience who really liked Spade Z kept a low profile from the moment they entered the arena. They never believed that Fu Shiming was Big Spade. After all, they all remembered their idol's words. Big Spade had said that he would join the He group when he killed someone with one move in the last live broadcast. But the public opinion was distorted by some reports, which made people think that Fu Shiming might be Spade Z. They didn't understand why some fans didn't listen to their idol and believed in some baseless analysis. Are you sure you're a fan and not a hater? The support was very powerful. Just one sentence was followed by a large number of whistles. Fu Shiming didn't expect things to turn out like this. Attacking the official website on the spot and retrieving the registration information. He still felt that everything was a nightmare. Fu Jiu, that sick loser, how could she be so powerful? Not to mention Fu Ximing's reaction, even Feng Shang and Yin Wuiao didn't know that their captain could do this. Hacker. Such a mysterious profession wasn't even close to reality. Chen Xiaodong couldn't believe it. Their family's young master, who only cared about men, was actually a hacker. He Honghua's eyes were so shocked that she couldn't control herself. Her Jiu. That was her Jiu. In the midst of all the noise, Fu Jiu stood up with one hand in her trouser pocket. Her posture was very cool. She looked at the Fu family team over there and raised her eyebrows with a smile. Just 3 words, but Fu Ximing's face turned pale. Even his lips lost their usual arrogance. The word, embarrassment, wasn't enough to describe his expression. But the camera was pointed at him, and everyone in the audience saw the embarrassment on his face. They thought that this was the end of the matter. But those fans who claimed to love Spade Z felt that Fu Jiu's actions were not only a slap to Fu Ximing's face, but also to their faces. They started to make a fuss. Since you are a hacker, surely you can tamper with the official registration information? She wanted to prove that she was Spade Z with just a form. Hee, do you think we're that easy to fool? The real Spade fans almost had high blood pressure. Let me ask, do you really like Big Spade? Not here to defame him. We want the truth. When the self-proclaimed fan said this, he felt like a little angel of justice. Nothing else. Fu Ximing saw that the situation had taken a turn for the better, and his artificial voice rang out again. In this day and age, if you're a hacker, you can even turn black into white. Spade fans couldn't stand his attitude. They rolled up their sleeves and wanted to beat him up. At the same time, I'll pack up all those fake fans and throw them out through the window. Those comments stung my ears. Where was his intelligence? But at this moment, Fu Jiu laughed. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be dyed with endless black mist. Fu Ximing, why are you in such a hurry? I didn't ask you to return the account. Chapter 226. Using a new account to compete. The referees looked at each other in shock. For so many years, no one had ever used a new account in the esports selection contest. There were too many limitations of a new account. After all, the top-level equipment in the game could only be used after reaching a certain level. Was this player planning to play in the ranking game without any equipment? But even so, there was no such rule in the rules. Because of the special situation, the referees had to look at the director's room, intending to talk to Manager Feng. Qin Mo's magnetic and deep voice sounded like a bottle of expensive red wine that had just been opened, exuding his unique grace. Let him use it. Being a man of few words was always in line with Almighty Qin's style. But the shoutcasters who knew their captain well felt their backs tighten. It seemed like their captain had never spoken up for anyone before. The 2 shoutcasters, who felt like they were spying on something, looked at each other, and without waiting for the referees to respond, they immediately said, "Okay, now let this player Fu Jiu apply for a new account and get ready for the first match." It was a very straightforward opening match. A live broadcast needed to constantly generate topics, and it couldn't slow down the pace. Every team sat back in front of their computers. Which team would PK with which team in the ranking game was random. They thought it was just a competition, but because of the identity of Spade Z, there was another topic to talk about. The big screen locked onto the list of the first duel. In this match, Fu Ximing and Fu Jiu didn't fight each other. Instead, the group of people who admired Fu Ximing wanted to PK with the He family army. Young Master Fu, let's go first. We'll help you teach this reckless kid a lesson. That little stutterer and a has-been player are just a little bit better on the ranking list. What can they do? Using a new account and still daring to compete? That person sneered. His eyes fell back on the computer screen, and he typed rapidly to his teammates, "The new account is their weakness. Destroy them all." Yes. Understood. The game screen officially turned on. Fujio put on her headphones with her fingers. Her fingers weren't on the keyboard, but she used one hand to move the mouse. The other team thought that a new account with no attack power would be taken down quickly. Who knew that when they all approached the game ID 9? Awarding you a slap of pleasure and North of Een Mountain appeared out of nowhere and used their ultimate skills at the same time. Silver light exploded, and the team was instantly wiped out. It hadn't even been a minute since the battle started. There were still 2 people on the He family army's side who hadn't made a move, but the health of the person on the other side was already empty. Was there still a need to fight? The opponent's captain struggled to stand up. Een Shan Yi Bei turned around and used up the last drop of his pen. Not only was the game being synchronized on the screen, but it was also synchronized with the person playing the game. That beautiful hand speed and counterattack was simply amazing. A has-been god. Little stutterer. Ha, I'll kill you. Yin Wuyao and Feng Shang had never had such tacit understanding before. They typed the same sentence at the same time. A gale of praises rang out in the arena. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.